We seek the truth.
Would you be handing your resignation to the Minister of Culture tomorrow, sir?
No, I will not.
The leader of the opposition, you have accused your government, sir, of using the Grenada Development Bank to facilitate the financing of personal loans for certain government ministers.
The other side is in no position to talk about those issues, and I will leave it there.
We discover new perspectives.
You know his leadership style, and so many are saying, why are you coming now to talk about those issues?
Now is the time to speak. You have the right to decide who will take over.
And you met with Dr. Mitchell, and perhaps you might want to confirm what that meeting was about in your response. But
Dr. Mitchell, like myself, are Grenadians.
We ask the right questions.
why was there no report on the work done of the commission? And how is this new committee different from the commission that was initially established back in 2022? So who are these elements that are using you?
I'm disappointed in my political leader.
And why is that animating those political conversations now?
It's a very interesting question.
The Bub Reports with Dr. Kellon Bub. Thought-provoking, truthful, unbiased, and truly original reporting.
We know that Jack William-Creft, the Minister of Education, is under house arrest. We know that Radix, the Minister of Justice, has been detained. We've heard no word from the Minister of Information, Selwyn Strawn, and Eunice Whiteman, as you've just said, on the line from Grenada coming up, that there's confusion there and that he's about to resign. The effective control based on the speech given by Hudson Austin and relayed by RFG so many times, which CBC carried, of course, to listeners and viewers, was indicative of something, indicative that the Central Committee is in charge. Now, the NGM situation is as this. There is the Central Committee, then there is the NJM Bureau, and then there is Cabinet. Now, Bernard Code commands a majority in the Central Committee. Central Committee made up of the junior leadership, junior officers in the Army, junior people in the national youth movements and the pioneer movements and so on, excepting in the militia, where Morris has the greater sympathy, so that Code can command respect at the Central Committee stage. But Morris has always been notoriously in command of the Cabinet stage of it. And it appears now that Bernard Code has recruited sufficient strength among the junior officer corps to neutralize the older revolutionary army types. Either they may be in prison or they may be so neutralized that they cannot act on behalf of the Morris Bishop faction, so that Code can strengthen his position at Central Committee, but I'm quite sure will be unable to recruit support at cabinet level other than that which he probably has at the moment.
It's obvious, Leslie, that there has been a rift between Code and Bishop for some time. What would you say brought this to a head at this particular time?
Yes, there's always been a gap fixed between Code and Morris Bishop because of the intensity of the ideology. Bernard Code has never refused to accept the fact that he's an ultra-Leninist. In fact, he seems very happy when you describe him as such. Morris Bishop, on the other hand, always fought. He strove to allow himself to be seen and expose himself as a moderate, even if he had radical plans in mind to shift away from what we call the Westminster type of democracy. But he's never indicated that he wanted to dispense with it in its entirety, unlike Bernard Code, who was always willing and continues to make speeches indicative that he intends to throw overboard any sort of Westminster pattern, any sort of election of the kind. And that was one of the bases. Second, Morris Bishop was rather more lenient to the people who had to be detained after the revolution, acknowledging that you had to detain some. Bernard Code was more intent on swifter action, even if that action or those actions might appear to be violent. He was not as calm in the situation as Morris Bishop has always been, and I think there a rift began. Secondly, you must have observed that there's been a softening in the attitude of Morris Bishop towards his other CARICOM colleagues, and in fact, significant was his meeting with the Assistant Secretary of State in the United States in July. What went on there, we never knew. We never got a complete final communique. But political observers, and I myself have observed, Morris Bishop coming back into the fold. You might wish to say coming out of the cold. He was doing things and saying things to assure his colleagues in CARICOM, look here, I'm sorry I had to break my promise. I couldn't hold the election sooner, but I'm going to do this. Another area of contention was the elections themselves, the appointment of the commission to draft the Constitution. Great differences between Bernard Coad and Morris Bishop, even in terms of the personnel for that committee, headed by Alexander and the other chaps like Hart, the Grenada Attorney General, and Morris wanted to get popular support on that, where Morris is strong. The masses, the trade union people still respect him because they still believe that in good time, a bishop would have been able to take them, well, not backward, as they don't want to say, but towards the path that could lead to peace and understanding and better neighborliness with their neighbors and the sort of pattern of government that they were used to. So that's another area in which there was definitely a rift between Bernard and Morris.
One factor that has to be taken into consideration is the wider Caribbean community. How would you see the other people in CARICOM, for instance, reacting if there were a change at the head of government in Grenada?
Jerry, remember the original de facto recognition. First of all, I think CARICOM waited a wee while on London. London's famous words were, there has been no change in the Governor General, and therefore no change in our behavior towards Grenada. All right? And then came the CARICOM de facto recognition. They had quite a discussion on this before it came out. And that de facto was, in fact, for Morris Bishop on the firm promises of elections and a return to normalcy as soon as possible. None of the present heads of government, I wouldn't like to speak for them, but I cannot see them sitting down with Bernard Coad. I mean, most emphatically, Lester Board, it was very hard. Henry D.B. Ford had to work very hard here in Barbados to get Lester and the St. Lucia and St. Vincent delegates to even agree to a de facto.
Morris Bishop and his group fired on the soldiers, killing 2 members of the PRA, Sergeant Dorset Peters and Warrant Officer Raphael Mason, and wounding several others. The Revolutionary Armed Forces were forced to storm the fort, and in the process, the following persons were killed: Morris Bishop, Unison Whiteman, Vincent Noel, Jacqueline Creft, Norris Bain, and Fitzroy Bain, among others.
We had to call this list of people that were killed on the fort. And I remember my sister just broke down and she started to cry. And that night, the whole place was so still in this strange way. It was just, you just knew something wasn't right. It was not just an ordinary shooting. It was just like, you shoot all the leaders of the country, so who's going to lead us now? That is the kind of thing. It was just this sad. And then people were crying, and you heard the neighbors shoo because as though everybody was scared now, they want to talk loud, so you hear the this grumbling from the neighbors because you were close, and you hear the grumbling there and the grumbling there, and then everybody afraid to call out to one another. And I remember that night, it was so sad.
Don't go there.
You are a technocrat. I mean, you can speak to whether or not it was appropriate or inappropriate for that to occur. Would you have done that as a permanent secretary?
Politicians get the information from wherever source that they can.
That's going to be the extent of your answer.
Yeah.
Don't go there.
There's a lot of noise around the data protection bill that, in my respectful view, is not warranted.
I was one of those making noise, and it's simply because I was concerned about that specific Section 33.
Don't go there.
Are you going to be offering yourself up as political leader of the party?
I see you've called me here for much more than diplomatic passports. I don't mind that.
Don't go there.
What is the relationship like between you and your leader, Dr. Mitchell, your boss, Dr. Mitchell?
I'm not sure how to explain how to answer this question at this time. I prefer not to answer.
Don't go there.
They said that you approached the bank for the loan before the election and that it only materialized after the election. There are also conflicting reports around the quantity of monies that were received. What is the reality here?
People try to extort the truth and to make all kinds of things about it. I just stay quiet. So if you notice, I was really and truly quiet about the whole matter.
Well, except with not with the New Today newspaper. The New Today newspaper reported on this, so I'm not too sure you were quiet on this. Go ahead, Honorable. Go ahead.
Well, I'm just trying to answer your question, right?
Don't go there.
I think we just spoke at length about the regularization framework. So
yes, we did. But let us talk, Prime Minister. Let us talk about the workers who are dismissed.
The Bub Report. We go there.
We seek the truth.
Would you be handing your resignation to the Minister of Culture tomorrow, sir?
No, I will not.
The leader of the opposition, you have accused your government, sir, of using the Grenada Development Bank to facilitate the financing of personal loans for certain government ministers.
The other side is in no position to talk about those issues, and I will leave it there.
We discover new perspectives.
You know his leadership style, and so many are saying, why are you coming now to talk about those issues?
Now is the time to speak. You have the right to decide who will take over.
And you met with Dr. Mitchell, and perhaps you might want to confirm what that meeting was about in your response. But
Dr. Mitchell, like myself, are Grenadians.
We ask the
viewers and listeners, a pleasant good morning to one and all, and we welcome you to this week's edition of the Bub Report. I am, of course, your humble host, Dr. Kellen Bub. Of course, today is a somber day of remembrance and commemoration in the national community of Grenada, as 42 years later, citizens in the national community commemorate the tragic and very violent demise of the Grenada Revolution. And so what we want to do today is to have a conversation about the demise of the Grenada Revolution against the backdrop of the 1983 intervention, some say invasion, that occurred of U.S. troops, against the backdrop of what is happening, what many are saying is a fact that history might be repeating itself with the request that the United States is making with respect to having military assets installed at the Maurice Bishop International Airport. And of course, we are titling that segment echoes indeed of 1983 and the U.S. military aggression against Venezuela. But of course, before we get going, we do want to get on with this week's editorial. Now, in the last 3 months, there have been several high-profile geopolitical policy developments to have befallen Grenada. Now, first, it was the announcement of the fishing ban on the Spice Isle, not by the government of Grenada, but by a member of the Fourth Estate. Then there was a revelation, that is, of the visa ban on one government minister. Again, not initially published by the government of Grenada, but published by a member of the Fourth Estate. Now, the third geopolitical dust-up involved the American regime's demands of Grenada to install war-ready radar equipment at the Maurice Bishop International Airport. Now, this story was only published by an eagle-eyed Hamlet Mark of WPG-10 television. Now, in all of those instances, the government simply published a press release after the fact on these issues. Now, the Minister of Foreign Affairs has been silent, and so has the Prime Minister, who is currently on a whirlwind tour of our ancestral homeland in West Africa. Now, the government's social media presence through the office of the Prime Minister has been quite frankly tone deaf, in my view, to say the least. And we have some questions for the administration on the issue of America's demands of Grenada. Now, at what point was this demand made? And when were you going to inform the people of Grenada of this? Would this issue have been swept under the rug if WPG-10 did not report on this. In fact, our understanding is that Mr. Mark sat on this story for a while, waiting for the government of Grenada to say something before he actually published the story. And at what point did you inform your OECS and CARICOM colleagues? And what decisions, if any, were taken at that level? Now, you see, this administration promised transparency on the issues, but on the aforementioned high-profile matters, you have been nothing but transparent, except for publishing tersely worded press releases, sort of on a need-to-know basis, which fails the test in crisis communication. Now, I have some humble advice for the administration as a communications academician and expert. Now, here goes. Now, when pressure hits the fan, as they say, the way a government communicates becomes a reflection of how it operates. This is not only what is said to the public, but how quickly, transparently, and responsibly those messages are shaped. Now, crises are no longer rare surprises. They are part of governance. Now, disruption can come from anywhere. The real question isn't if a crisis will happen, but how prepared your government is when it does. Of course, your government touted your social media bona fides as one of the factors that determined your last election victory. So, government of Grenada, it is instructive for you to develop a crisis communication strategy to treat with this current geopolitical stalemate in which we find ourselves, because the current approach is certainly not helping your agenda nor the nation. And of course, in the absence of a fully formed narrative from the government, others will form that narrative for you. Folks, this is the Bub Report. We'll be back for the first segment of the program. Please stand by for that.
Should your loved ones pass on, they deserve to be treated with dignity. And at S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, we can provide you with that service. We can take you every step of the way during your sorrowful moments. When that need arises, call S.A. Johnson Funeral Home at 347-777-9797. That's 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home is a Caribbean family-owned funeral home here in Brooklyn, providing funeral services, but in a dignified way. From cremation to burial to the repatriation of your loved ones, you don't have to go through the hassle, as we provide exceptional service that allows you to mourn and heal peacefully. For more information, visit our website, www.sajohnsonfuneral.org. Send us an email at sajfuneral@aol.com or call 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, because you deserve to be treated with dignity.
And folks, welcome back to this week's edition of the Bub Report. Of course, before we get to a panel segment, we do want to hear from you, audience. Of course, we normally do a roll call here. Where are you watching the Bub Report from? We had some folks yesterday who I met at a Grenada Nutmeg Alliance. It's a nonprofit that was recently formed here in the state of Maryland, and they had a successful fundraiser last evening in Bowie, Maryland. And of course, I had an opportunity to meet many Grenadians there who were in attendance. So let us see. We have Lydia James here, who is joining us from Canada, as always. Then we have a guest here, a viewer who is joining us from, I believe she said England, I believe. Let me pull that up here. Montreal, Canada. Of course, Dexter Regis, that is. Dexter Regis is joining us from England. Dexter, you didn't say which part of England you're joining us from, but that would be good. Then we have Jennifer Lawrence, who is here from Brooklyn as well. Then we have Victor Palmer. Victor Palmer. Any relation, sir, to R.O. Palmer, the late R.O. Palmer, Governor General? He's joining us there from Canada. Then we have Aki, who is in Grenada. Mo Handsome Franklin is in Brooklyn. Then we have someone here from St. Thomas in the U.S. Virgin Islands. That's Bino Bailey. Mr. Bailey, good morning to you, sir. Welcome to the Bub Report. I don't think we've had a viewer from St. Thomas, or maybe you have been, but we didn't know. Then we have Susan Thomas, who is here in New Jersey. Dexter says he's in West London. So West London, shout out to Dexter there in West London. And of course, Onika, you've become a regular viewer of the program. Shout out to you. You're joining us from Brooklyn. You're joining us from Brooklyn, New York. Then we have Dr. Peters, who's joining us from Seamoon in St. Andrew. Harold Douglas, Brooklyn. Again, we have Barbara Henry, who's joining us from the United Kingdom. We have folks from Atlanta. Folks, just keep the shouts coming. Definitely, we want to acknowledge all our valued viewers who join us here every Sunday, whether we're live or not on the program. We certainly appreciate your participation. We appreciate your input. And somebody said, I look angry. I look and sound angry. Miss, what's your name? Marsha Gray. I don't know what you're talking about, but certainly you're entitled to your own opinion. Nola is joining us from the Netherlands. Then we have Dexter Regis, who is saying enough blessings to you, Dr. Bub. Leonard Greenwich, of course, Pierre is joining us from Four Roads, my old stomping ground, Four Roads, Grenville Street area. Philip is in, he's also in Spice Country. So folks over there on our YouTube page, please do us a favor by just liking this week's program and ensuring that you're also sharing the program. Of course, now before we get to the panel segment, folks, we actually have a breaking news development. We have a breaking news development that we want to share with you. Let me pull up that Chiron here. And that breaking news development that we got this morning, and this is confirmed. Obviously, we have actually reached the government of Grenada to speak to this, but independent sources, the government has not responded through the press secretary as yet, but sources are telling us that the United States has also asked Grenada again to accept third country migrants. We don't know whether or not that is a request that is paired to the request to have military assets placed at the Maurice Bishop International Airport, but our understanding is that the U.S. government has again brought up the issue of Grenada accepting third country deportee migrants who are not Grenadian, but who are from other countries that the U.S. has been deporting to third party countries where these migrants are not even from. A number of African countries have accepted this, but certainly we have not heard of any other Caribbean country accepting third country migrants who are being deported from the United States. But we understand that the request has come up again, and that is a story, folks, we will be following. And of course, we also believe that the coalition on the Zone of Peace also has a statement on this issue. So let us now get into this week's panel segment, folks. Of course, this week's panel segment titled Echoes of 1983 and U.S. Military Aggression Against Venezuela. So if you just bear with me here while I adjust my teleprompter to get this script and pull this up here. All right, there we go. All right, so last week, of course, the Grenada Coalition for a Zone of Peace urged the government to hold public consultations before deciding on a request by the U.S. government. We framed this as a demand by the U.S. government to install radar equipment at the Maurice Bishop International Airport. Now, the team held their press conference on the same day that Admiral Halsey visited Grenada to hold a high-level meeting with the top brass of the National Security Command on the island, including the island's Commissioner of Police and Grenada's National Security Advisor to the Prime Minister. Now, the coalition is also voicing strong opposition to the proposal, which they believe can negatively impact national sovereignty and regional security. Now, a small protest was also held by concerned citizens on the issue in St. George, the town of St. George last week, which ended at the Prime Minister's office at the Botanical Gardens. Now, shortly after his visit to Grenada, the Admiral resigned. Meanwhile, yesterday, Saturday, October 18th, the CARICOM issued a statement. The CARICOM heads of government issued a statement saying, quote, that CARICOM met and discussed various issues on the regional agenda, including the increased security buildup in the Caribbean and the potential impacts on member states, save in respect of Trinidad and Tobago, who reserved its position. Heads agreed on the following, quote, they reaffirmed the principle of maintaining the Caribbean region as a zone of peace and the importance of dialogue and engagement towards the peaceful resolution of disputes and conflict, unquote. Of course, CARICOM goes on to say that they remain willing to assist towards that objective. Of course, the CARICOM heads also reiterated their continued commitment to fighting narco-trafficking and the illegal trade in small arms and light weapons, which adversely affects the region. And of course, I do want to welcome our guests for this week's segment of our program. We have joining us from Grenada, Dr. Terence Marichal, who is here in his capacity as a member of the Coalition on the Zone of Peace. Then we have Dr. David Hines, who is a political analyst with expertise in international relations. And of course, we have Mr. Kenny Lal Singh, who was, of course, a former political detainee under the People's Revolutionary Government. Gentlemen, welcome to this week's program.
Thank you, Kellan. It's a pleasure to be here once again. And thank you for your kind invitation.
Yes, absolutely. Of course, before we get into it, gentlemen, of course, this is October 19th. And of course, today is indeed a somber day for Grenada. But Mr. Dr. Hines, I want to begin with you, sir. Where were you upon hearing the news of the demise of the Grenada Revolution and the events that unfolded on October 19th?
I was a young man and I was a member of the Working People's Alliance. And we had been in continuous session since the events of October had begun. And we would meet every day. I was a young member at the time. And following the events, one of our leaders, Dr. Rupert Rupnarain, was in Grenada at the time of the crisis, and we were receiving reports from time to time. But on that day, we were in session at the party's school. In those days, you know, the political parties had their schools, and we were at the party school when the news came in. And I remember so many of us, especially the younger members, breaking down in tears. I cried like a baby because that was a time when my generation felt that we could change the world. Grenada had happened, and we had an opportunity to make right the promise of emancipation and later the promise of independence. And to see it go up like that, we felt that the world had ended for us. And all of us hugged and cried. It was a day, a time that I will never forget.
Yes, Dr. Marichal, of course, you were in Cuba at the time. Where were you when the news came?
Okay, let me say I greet you on this very, very solemn occasion, on the occasion of the 42nd anniversary of the demise of the revolution and the tragic events of October 19, 1983. Of course, when these events took place, I was a medical student in Cuba at the time. And this came like a great surprise to all of us because only weeks before that, we were in Grenada. We understood that, you know, Morris was at the height of his popularity. He had just come off this very successful trip to the United States when he addressed people at Hunter College and was very well received. And when I came to Grenada on holidays in August, I really, really felt good to hear the support for Morris, and could hardly imagine that within a matter of maybe 2 months that you'll not only be a corpse, but considered by some as a counter-revolutionary. I was in Cuba at that time, and we were all distraught. We were crying. We couldn't believe what we had heard, and a group of us, we organized and we marched to the Grenadian embassy in Cuba, in Havana, where we sought some, clarity on what had been taking place. Of course, on that day, we saw messages coming off the telex machine at the embassy, because we had, in fact, literally taken over the embassy because we were not getting answers and we wanted answers. And then we saw these messages coming off the telex machine, which said that Morris Bishop, Unison Whiteman, were killed in crossfire.
The Bub Report, Bub, Kellen, what's that audio?
No, we could hardly believe what we were hearing. It was just incredible for us. It was a nightmarish kind of scenario that developed among us in Cuba when we realized that this was the end of our revolution. This was the end of everything that we had sacrificed and came to Cuba for, which is to study, gain our professions, and go back to Grenada and to help to build a revolution. And so what was euphoria for us and the dawn of a new era suddenly became our biggest nightmare and biggest crisis in our lives, where we knew what was going to happen and what was going to transpire after those events took place. In fact, the Australia was in the forefront of all of this trouble. And word was being sent back to the RMC that Terry Marshall was conducting counter-revolutionary activity in Grenada, which meant that my life was already in danger if that regime were to survive.
Yeah, let me bring in, of course, Mr. Lal Singh has a totally different experience here, because Mr. Lal Singh, you were in fact at the Richmond Hill prison at the time of the demise of the revolution. You were detained by the People's Revolutionary government. So while, yes, there is one narrative about the revolution with respect to its successes, one of the, and Dr. Marshall has admitted this before, one of the drawbacks, one of the downsides of the revolution was the lack of due process, was the lack of accounting for justice in the way that we think of justice. So Mr. Lal Singh, and we will get into that conversation later, but you were detained. First of all, what were the charges that were brought against you that caused your detention? Were you tried? What was your experience up at the Richmond Hill prison? If in fact you were there, of course, there was another facility in Hopevale. And the second part of that question is, on October 19th, did any word make it to the prison that in fact the revolution had collapsed?
First of all, thank you for inviting me to your show.
Yes, sir.
It's always a pleasure to be here on this very special day. To just do a little correction.
Yes.
I was not at the prison on October 1983. I was detained, not tried, not sentenced, but I spent 2 years and 10 days between the Richmond Hill prison and the prison at the fort. So I was released almost 2 years before the demise of the unholy revolution, without any trial. Now, the revolution came. People had high expectations, but really and truly, it was dissatisfying to people internally of the revolution, but they couldn't say anything, and a majority of people outside of the revolution. We were not happy with what was taking place. Hence the reason a number of us were picked up. Probably nearly 5,000 people were detained from time to time by Morris Bishop and his People's Revolutionary Government without trial. Many people died in prison. So when the greatest day, I believe, the greatest day in Grenada, October 1983, when we saw the demise of the revolution, that there were many deaths, but that is how it was crafted. If you are dishonest to the people, you govern dishonestly, then you will die in a dishonest way. But it was the greatest day in Grenada when the revolution was brought to an end.
Mr. Lansing, those are very strong words, of course. Of course, in the interest of balance, and we litigated this on the program before. Obviously, there are others who will not agree with that positioning. But we are here, gentlemen, to discuss another matter. And I've titled this program Echoes of 1983 and U.S. military aggression against Venezuela. So one of the things we really want to set this up, gentlemen, by attempting to make parallels between what occurred in Grenada in 1983 and what we're seeing now through this geopolitical lens. Because, of course, this is happening, to my mind, as a student of history, in the context of this Monroe doctrinal ethos of the United States, that, you know, that they have established dominance and they will continue to maintain dominance in the Western Hemisphere on their terms and on their terms only. So, Dr. Hines, I want to begin with you to create that setup for us, please.
Well, you're quite right. The Monroe Doctrine is alive and well. It has been updated from the early 19th century to the present.
Yes.
And we know we had it updating during the Reagan era. And it was during that time we had the Grenadian Revolution. And now it has been updated by Donald Trump. But it's more than just, I think, it is more than just the Monroe Doctrine. It's the Washington Consensus, which was promulgated at the end of the Second World War, when the victors of that war met in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, in the United States of America. And they did several things when they were there. They created institutions that are still with us, the IMF, the World Bank, etc. They divided the world between the East and the West. And they were creating this new world order that was going to ensure that there was not going to be a third world war among European and other large states. The thing about that, it was that the English-speaking Caribbean did not exist as sovereign states at that time. So when we became independent starting in 1962, we were entering a world that was not created for us or by us. And so everything we did from there on was trying to survive in that hostile world. And we came out of the Cold War, which really ended that Washington Consensus. And we came out of that world order clawing for our survival. And we limped along for the last 2 or 3 decades. And here again, we have this new world order and small Caribbean states. We are caught in the crossfire. David Rudder, in that classic calypso, said the more things change, the more things rearrange, everything remains the same. What he was doing in that calypso was anticipating what a post-Cold War would mean for small states like the Caribbean. And he asked, he said, please make a liar of me, that the Caribbean would not be caught again as they were caught in the Cold War. Mm-hmm. And I think David is still around, not as well as he used to be, but he would say, you have not made a liar of me. Here we are in 2023 on the anniversary of the Grenadian Revolution. Whether you stand on Mr. Lal Singh's side of the revolution or the other side. The fact of the matter is a revolution is something that doesn't happen every day. You can count them on your two hands. And whether you like it or you didn't like it, it happened in our Caribbean. And for us in the English-speaking Caribbean, everything was before Grenada and after Grenada. So here we are on this anniversary, having to grapple with the same thing that we grappled with 40 years ago.
Yeah.
Big countries making decisions. We are not involved in making that decision. We are not involved in the issues in a direct way that are being discussed, but we are at the center of what is happening.
Absolutely. Dr. Marshall, you've heard what Dr. Hines just articulated here, except Dr. Hines framed this in the context of Cold War politics, Cold War geopolitics, but we no longer have the Soviet bloc, right? Russia, the USSR no longer exists. The socialist, Marxist, Leninist, communist ethos that informed Russia's influence in the Caribbean no longer exists. Of course, you have another communist country, that is China. Of course, China is devoid of militarism in the Caribbean. And of course, one might argue that they're using the sort of a capitalist framing to expand their influence. It's sort of a neoliberal framing, which is the paradox with the People's Republic of China here. But of course, China is the great power in the region. And while they're another great power in the region, they're not certainly using military. So let us talk about, pick up on what Dr. Hines just said here.
Well, I think it's all about the U.S. and in particular under this present administration projecting their strength and their power into not just the region, but practically all over the world. Whether it is through military means or economic means, the U.S. maintains maybe 1,000 bases, military bases all over the world. And this projection into the Caribbean is just another way of affirming what Dr. Hines has said, where the Monroe Doctrine is concerned. They just want to be seen right now simply because of the projection of China into the region, where China is getting a foothold into many of the countries of the region by building economic projects, not like what the U.S. does. The U.S. drops bombs, creates havoc, destroys the economy. But China is doing exactly the opposite. They're building infrastructural projects that the United States has never built for us. In fact, in this present conflict, even with Venezuela, when you look at how much Venezuela has done for Grenada compared to what the U.S. has done in terms of helping our economy, helping our infrastructure, you can point to nothing really in Grenada except maybe the pink house or the mental asylum that was bombed during the invasion that they have rebuilt because they saw some responsibility to rebuild it. It shouldn't have been bombed in the first case. That's the only thing you can really point to. You can point to projects from the Chinese. You can point to the National Stadium. You can point to the housing projects that they have engaged in that benefit the people in a very profound and direct way, which the U.S. has never done for us. Now, to call on us in this period of time when there's relative stability in the region, again, I can say that where the U.S. is concerned, the only time our region has been disturbed, the peace has been disturbed, is really through the very U.S. itself. Whether it was in Haiti, whether it was in the Bay of Pigs, and what happened on October the 25th, 1983. That is the only time our peace in modern times has really been disturbed, and it has only been disturbed by the United States. Now, we know that a big power, we know that. There's no question about that. We can't fire them. We don't have the means to fire them. We have never tried to oppose them in any way, except when it comes to the defense of our peace, our sovereignty, and our territorial integrity. And to be threatening that at this time, to put us in the crosshairs of conflicts that they themselves have created. We didn't create any of these conflicts. They are the ones creating these conflicts in our region. And to put us in the crosshairs of this conflict, and particularly right now with Venezuela, which is a friendly neighbor, someone who has done so much for us, is really asking too much. And this is not by accident, because as you mentioned at the beginning of the segment, they started attacking the Cuban medical
I think we are losing Dr. Marisho there in terms of the connection, but I do want to bring in Mr. Lausing. Mr. Lausing, you've heard these two gentlemen here about where we are in the context of, again, this heightened geopolitics from the north. They are the ones who are, overtly now threatening regime change against Venezuela, and the current White House occupant is very transparent about what their interests are in the context of Venezuela. He mentioned this week about the CIA involvement in Venezuela. He referenced before that they want the oil. In fact, the woman who won the Nobel Peace Prize said that she's dedicating the Peace Prize to Trump. And in fact, she's the one that is calling for also regime change in Venezuela. So let us reflect on all of that, Mr. Lausing, against the backdrop of what they're requesting from Grenada. That is the U.S. now.
Yeah, well, I don't believe in any regime change violently. Now, in Grenada, it was almost called for when the demise of the revolution came, and the Americans came and they rescued us because there was chaos in the country. The present situation, Kellan, while Venezuela is a dictator, President Maduro is a dictator. He dictates everything around him. He brutalizes his people. He squanders his economy and the wealth of the country. He wants to claim 2/3 of Guyana, and he hasn't dropped that claim. Some of the CARICOM friends have asked him to hold out still. He has claimed Bud Island from Dominica. We're trying to paint Venezuela as a saint. They are not saint. But at the same time, I don't agree with any change of government violently. I don't agree with it. Now, to go back to what was said earlier on.
Yes.
China has developed its own Monroe Doctrine from an economic reason. They could not fight wars like Russia and the USA and Japan. So what they did, they smartly developed the economy, and so they could dominate trade throughout the world. But they further went along and control. They are building things in various countries. As a matter of fact, they're very tough and bad paying countries. If you did not pay, we will take over the project. And I don't have a problem with that, because I believe if you commit yourself to a project, you must manage it properly. And the problem in the world is many people who want to seek political involvement and to control the country, they lack the economic and managerial ability to manage the economies. Many of the countries in the world, many in Africa. As a matter of fact, I don't think CARICOM has done very well in terms of developing our countries. I believe we could have done better. And I say so. I say so because I have been involved in politics. I'm an entrepreneur from my life. I'm a self-made self-educated. He went back to the days of late Wellington Friday, a former MP and minister, who proclaimed, soon we will be starting the university without walls. And everybody was amazed. everybody was asking, well, what is that university without walls? We were very close. And I asked him what he meant. He said, well, we're going to broaden education. You're going to stay wherever you are and educate yourself. And the reason, Kellan, I educated myself along the way in almost every field. So just to get back, I don't agree with any regime change violently, but I also don't like dictators brutalizing the people.
But yes, but you see the hypocrisy here that we have to acknowledge in the context of the U.S. I mean, the U.S. is transparently hypocritical. You know, they would call Cuba communist. You know, they would say that Venezuela has a dictatorship, but yet they've given China, communist China, where these freedoms that you reference do not exist. They would give them most favored nations trading status. They have diplomatic relations, heightened, you know, the most favorable trading relations with some of the most repressive regimes in the Middle East that executes people and throws them off roofs, right? These countries do not have democracy by any means, right? So, but here they are prescribing, you know, a militaristic prescription to folks in their backyard, I suppose. And Dr. Hines, I suppose that's what the Monroe Doctrine is all about. And maybe later we can speak to perhaps how all of that, the way that the world is now divided, you know, it's every bully to their territory. In the context of Asia, it is China that is establishing dominance. They want to invade Taiwan. They want to annex territory in the South China Sea. In the Western Hemisphere is the United States. So, Dr. Hines, I want you to pick up on what Mr. Lal Singh said here, please.
Yeah, you know, I agree with Mr. Lal Singh in terms of his analysis of Venezuela. And I want to go back to the Grenadian Revolution. And again, I say I'm being very cautious. I'm not Grenadian. I'm Guyanese, of course. And so I don't want to speak for Grenadians. And so whenever I look at the revolution, I begin from within the context of the larger Caribbean, the old West Indies, that revolution, in part of its manifestation, was about our sovereignty, because we have always had a tenuous sovereignty from the time of the slave plantation come right through. The question of our sovereignty has always been a very important question. And I think for my generation, from a Caribbean standpoint, one of the things that the Grenadian Revolution did was to raise anew the question of sovereignty and forced us to think about Caribbean sovereignty in a certain way. And so with the demise of the revolution, from a Caribbean standpoint, our sovereignty took a beating. And I think our sovereignty from that time to the present has been very, very limited and very tenuous. And as I have reflected over the last 40 years, I think in a real pragmatic way, we in the Caribbean have to come to terms with certain things. One is that we have the United States as a big, powerful country that is not going to go anywhere, that is going to have its way whenever it wants to have its way. It has the military might, the economic might to do so. And we in the Caribbean do not have the military might. We do not have the economic might. We do not have leverage, even at the level of our sovereignty. Those are facts, and the end of the Grenadian Revolution really, in a sense, deepened that. But we also have, in the case of Venezuela, a regional hemispheric hegemon. I mean, I'm from Guyana. Venezuela claims 2/3 of my country. It has not compromised on it. It has been very bullish on it. It has threatened Guyana militarily. At the same time, it has been good to the Eastern Caribbean economically. So it has a mixed bag from Venezuela. And we in the Caribbean have to navigate that We have to navigate the mixed bag. We can't say Venezuela is good and forget that it is bad to Guyana. It's good to the Eastern Caribbean.
You say they're good to the Eastern Caribbean, but Venezuela has claimed lots of territory as far north as Dominica and Antigua. There is the Bird Island question.
Yes.
So they are, obviously they are a sort of, I suppose, a Southern Caribbean hegemon here.
Hegemon, yes. Yes.
So one must critique that as well as you've articulated, as you've perfectly articulated.
And as I lay that out to make the point, Kelon, that this intervention by the United States is as complex as they come, because the object is Venezuela, which has a mixed bag. We in the English-speaking Caribbean, over the last 40 years, since the end of the Grenadian Revolution, we have tried to survive as best as we can. We didn't send for the Chinese. The Chinese came when the Americans opportunistically turned their gaze to the Middle East. And as international politics go, when you leave one pen open, somebody else come in. And the Chinese came in. And yes, the Chinese are economic hegemons, if you will, but as small countries, we take what we can get in that situation. Then we have the Russians coming in to Venezuela. And so here we are in this complex situation. I am arguing that for us in the Caribbean, there must be a way for big countries like China and Russia and the United States and even hegemons such as Venezuela to conduct their business and leave us out of it. For me, this is the big issue here. How do you engage if you're the United States? How do you carry out your business in Venezuela without dragging us in the Caribbean into it? And I think that there must be a way to do that. And there must be a way for us in the Caribbean to say, look, this envy business, we don't produce drugs in the Caribbean to supply the United States. So if you're fighting drugs, leave us out of it. All right? For the most part, we in the Caribbean are what they loosely call liberal democracies. We don't have big dictators and so on. We have authoritarianism. So we end in that league. If you want to go after Venezuela because their dictatorship, leave us out of it, because we are not in that league. I am saying that this is an opportunity for the Caribbean to carve out, not the old non-alignment, but a new foreign policy, a new international relations that leave us out of it. We are here as small states. We struggle. We don't look for trouble. As Dave Martins, the Calypsonian from Guyana, said, we struggle. We don't look for trouble. Leave us out. And so I think this is an opportunity for Grenada and the rest of the English-speaking Caribbean to sit down with the United States and say, conduct your business with Venezuela or whoever you want to conduct your business, but leave us out of it.
Well, but Dr. Hines, I just have to challenge you here on this question of leaving us out, leaving the Caribbean out of this. How could that happen when the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago has hitched her wagons on the coattails of the current White House occupant? She went as far as when he was elected last year to really wade into the internal politics of the United States. And she still continues to be a cheerleader. In fact, she has given a succor of Trinidadian territory to the American military for them to conduct extrajudicial killings against her own citizens. So we have that question as well, the question of Trinidad and Tobago and the complicated question of Guyana. So, of course, the U.S. might be saying, well, here you have two major economies of the Caribbean. And, of course, I suspect some of these leaders in Washington can't tell Grenada or St. Vincent apart on a map. But the point is, how can that happen, saying to the Caribbean, leave us out of this, when you have two major Caribbean economies that are hitched economically and politically to the United States?
Your point is well taken. We've always had to deal with diversity. At the time of the Asian Revolution, some in the hemisphere didn't go along with the Asian Revolution. In 1953, when Britain invaded Guyana, its own territory, in October of 1953, this very month,
yes,
there were some of the English-speaking Caribbean leaders who went along with England. And as you know, at the time of the Grenadian Revolution and the demise, right, about 4 of our prime ministers actually invited the United States to come in. Eugenia Charles later said that they wanted to invite England, but not the United States, but they couldn't get England to come in. And so they settled the United States. We have always had to deal with this diversity. And we have always found a way to get around it. So yes, Trinidad has taken that position. Guyana is going to be forced to take that position because of Venezuelans claim on our territory. But I think there is still a way to work out a consensus among the English-speaking Caribbean on what we are calling a zone of peace. And a zone of peace must not just mean rhetoric. It must mean a protection of our civilization. It must become an ethos where we are saying, work around us. Don't come to us. Find somewhere to put your radar, somewhere else to put your radar. Find somewhere else to be your jumping off spot. We are too small and too fragile to take that kind of burden.
Let me bring in, let's see if we can get Father Gerard Paul. Father Paul, are you with us? Are you able to hear us, Father?
Yes, I'm hearing you very clearly. Are you hearing me?
Yes, we are hearing you very clearly. Thanks for taking time out of your Sunday holy day, sir, to join us on the Bub Report. Welcome,
yeah, you're
sir.
very welcome. You're very welcome. Yes. Thank you very much.
Father, one of the reasons why I wanted to bring you in here as a theologian, as a man of God, as a prelate of the Catholic Church, of course, is the very moral, strongly grounded moral stance you've taken against American funded really military activities. And some might say that both the Israeli army and the US army, they're hitched together. A very moral stance you've taken, calling for the end to the atrocities committed against the people of Gaza. And now we're seeing this development in our region, Father Paul. So we really wanted to get your perspective on all of this.
Yes, thank you very much. So you call me a prelate of the Catholic Church. I just want to say that until they get rid of me, because
until they get rid of
serious.
Okay, all right, Father.
I just give a little footnote.
Yes, Father, go ahead.
They have put the efforts. The leader of the Catholic Church in Grenada has put the efforts to get rid of me from the church, to defrock me on steroids. And he's actually lying and saying that the Pope's representative, referred to as the nuncio based in Trinidad, has asked him to deal with my case and get rid of me. But he's really he's using the man as a screen, I believe. I firmly believe he's lying as he does. Anyhow, that's not what we're talking about here today. I did not come at the beginning. I got in when Mr. Lal Singh was speaking, and he and the gentleman from Guyana, the doctor from Guyana, whose name I didn't get, have made some very salient points. So what I would like to say here is that helping to contextualize the whole situation, and the gentlemen have already brought a lot of context to the situation. When you're dealing with the United States, you're dealing with an empire. And historically, you go back from the Assyrian, the Persian, the Roman Empire, the Greco-Roman Empire. All of empires operate they are what you call, they operate in the sphere of hegemony, meaning that we are all powerful. We can do what we want. We can continue to steal your resources. Britain did it. Everyone, the French, everyone did it. I mean, all the artifacts from across the world are still and all the artifacts that you find in the Greek museum, in museums of Greece, was stolen from Egypt, and so on and so forth. So that's the context I want to bring to it. The United States think, and especially since 1991, they saw themselves.
I think we lost.
Whatever I want to do, I see your gold, I'm coming for it. I see your Venezuela with all its oil and other minerals, I am coming for it. It belongs to me. Imagine Trump, that fool, could just simply proclaim one day that we go call Gaza the Riviera of Gaza, and we're going to populate it with hotels and this and that. You would just take the people and throw them out. When they say these things, they mean it. Okay? They mean it. So what is going on in Gaza is quite related to the Guyana story. It's the same hegemonic power, the United States, who decided that they can allow their proxy Israel. As a matter of fact, Israel is more than a proxy. You know, Kissinger once referred to Israel as the United States aircraft carrier in the Middle East. I think it was Biden who said it. I think it was Biden. And he said, if there wasn't an Israel in the United in the Middle East, we would have had to create that aircraft carrier. We would have to create that stronghold. So they armed the Israel to the teeth. Look what Israel is doing, and America is backing them. They're not backing them. They are heart and soul in it. They are joined at the hips. And, you know, some people are arguing, well, it's the Israeli lobby that controlling. That is garbage. In my view, the United States is in control. And the day Biden say you have to have a ceasefire for his own political reasons, they have to have a ceasefire. As simple as that. He did not even come into power yet when he required Netanyahu to have a ceasefire. And Netanyahu had to at least have that temporary ceasefire. So that's what they do. Look where they have gone. I mean, look what is happening in Syria. An Al-Qaeda leader who was wanted by the United States for crimes against humanity has become Giuliani, has become the president of Syria. And he's backed. He's gone to the White House. He's going to the United Nations. And they're just killing the people of Syria, the Alawites and the Christians, and they're just massacring them. And the United States is backing Israel to do that. Israel bombs Lebanon forever. Since 1982 as a boy, I know Israel bombing Lebanon, you know, taking a whole chunk in Lebanon up to the Litania River and doing whatever they want, just killing people. I mean, thousands of people who are not involved in any political. You want one man, so you want Nazara. I'm not getting the pronunciation right now, but you want him. You say he's a terrorist, but you're going to flatten 6 blocks of high-rise buildings to get one man. We can do anything we want in any part of the world.
So yes,
Look,
Father Paul.
yes,
Father Paul. Yes, Father Paul. Let us now take it to what's happening in our region. Are we going to be seeing the same types of militarism here? I mean, I'm sure you probably read the release from the Grenada Coalition of the Zone of Peace here on trying to get Grenada to remain as a zone of peace so that we're not embroiled with the U.S. But if the U.S. comes calling, what can Grenada do? That says we want a base here, and this is what it's going to be, or else, all of these economic weaponization, we can put that against you.
Yes, that's true, and I think that's what they do. They use their strong arm tactics.
Yeah.
But you know, there are two forces that motivate human beings. The first force, or the more regular one that motivates us, is fear. And the next force is love. You understand? So I was supposed to shut my mouth about the Gaza thing because the church had the authority to defrock me, and they could do this and they could do that. And in that sense, the church is like the hegemonic power, the United States, who can do whatever they want to you. But we need to have some intestinal fortitude, some balls. And we need to have big balls here in Grenada and say no. Resistance is meaningful, and resistance is what does the trick. They had to run out of Yemen. The United States has to run out from Yemen. Saudi Arabia has to run out from Yemen. Qatar has to run out from Yemen. All these powerful countries backed by the United States, and the United States themselves had to run out from Yemen. Why are we afraid to die for our dignity? Why are we afraid to die for the pride of Grenada? Why are we afraid to die for our sovereignty? Today we are celebrating 19th of October. What most people in Grenada, I'll say most people in Grenada believe were heroes who died for a cause. When the revolution started in 1979, Ortiz, I don't remember his first name. He was either chargé d'affaires to the Caribbean, the OECS or something like that, the United States chargé d'affaires. He came to Grenada and talked to Maurice Bishop and the boys and say, you all better stop all your stupidness. End of it. They said, we are a sovereign nation. We are not in your backyard. This is our heritage. People have fought. Fedor fought. Fedor didn't give up. Fedor died, but he fought. And his legacy and his history and his contribution to the heritage of Grenada remains. So we can say, no, we are not going to get involved. Our brother from Guyana, Dr. from Ghana, was saying we have to make the case that we are a small nation, we are fragile, we are vulnerable, and I agree with that as a sort of a diplomatic argument we can use. But I am saying more than that, or in addition to that, we can say no. You want to sacrifice us on the altar? Well, sacrifice us. But we can say no, and no is no. Or else, what all that charade? Last year we celebrated 50 years of independence. I wasn't even in the island. I think I was in Dubai. And all that thing that was made, I heard about drones flying in, everybody with colors and jumping up when independence come, we waving with flag, we doing with this, we doing with that. And now, when the critical point comes for us to claim our independence and stand for our independence, we're going to run away? I would not run away, and I think many Grenadians would not run away. And by the way, before I ever forget and the program finishes, I use this opportunity to call on the Prime Minister of Grenada. I don't know what was said before, I wasn't here very early, but call on Grenada, the Prime Minister of Grenada, and the Prime Minister and government of Grenada to establish a national dialogue on this situation. We don't want we want real democracy. We don't want, right now, as far as I know, the government is very quiet. The Prime Minister is very quiet about it. There is no real dialogue taking place. And then one day, they're going to announce a decision for us, the people of Grenada. Don't the people of Grenada have hearts and minds and experience to put into the pot for the decision-making process? I call upon the Prime Minister to establish a national dialogue over the situation. And that's where his power is going to come from to say no. If the people of this country say no, the Prime Minister cannot say yes. He's not supposed to be forced to say yes. So that's one thing, the national dialogue. And I also want to say a personal thing. I love the Prime Minister. I support him as a young man trying to. But if he says yes, I will minus my support very vehemently, and all the people I ever know, to work against support for him, because you cannot sell our country for a few dollars and some kind of foolishness. I heard somebody saying earlier on the United States invaded Grenada and gave Grenada nothing. And that's true. That's true. The United States, they don't consider us. We don't exist excepting when we ought to be used or when they need to use us. Say no, and no means no.
All right, Father Paul, we will certainly put you backstage for a bit, but I do want to bring in both Mr. Lal Singh and Dr. Marisho here. But Dr. Marisho, before I bring in Mr. Lal Singh, I want to talk about the coalition that was formed. There was a press conference held. You know, Dr. Marisho, I have to say this. The voices we are hearing on this issue, there may be a generational divide on this, because it seems to be people of a certain generation who grew up in the age of the 70s, grew up in the age of the Cold War, who grew up in the 80s, who have been very vocal on this. In fact, there was a protest in town, in the town of St. George last week, and literally it was a few pickings. And, you know, people were just walking around. It just seems very Orwellian to me. People just walking around minding their business. And again, I'm looking on social media, and people of another generation, the younger generation, shall we call them the generation of who grew up in the 90s and the early 2000s and so on and so forth. They're still making their TikToks, and, you know, they're doing their social media posts there on the beach as though nothing is happening. So the reason why I'm framing this way, Dr. Marisho, is what kind of groundswell support that Father Paul is just asking for here from the people will you be getting on this? People don't seem to care. People seem to care more about their access to their visas and their barrels and their packages coming down on JetBlue and going up to Brooklyn for Labor Day, as opposed to really treating with these fundamental issues that we're confronting.
And I would agree with you very strongly, Kellan, because today's generation does not have that same level of political consciousness that we had in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s. They're more materialistic, and they're quite removed from the real political drama that is taking place in Grenada. They're not as patriotic. They are not as conscious and involved in what is taking place in the country, and that's a shame. But this is where people like us come in. This is where people like the Coalition for the Zone of Peace come in, because we understand the issues much better than the younger people. And it is a lack of education, a lack of sensitization on the part of the government, first of all, who receives these requests and never ventilate it, never tell us about it until people break the news. So a lot of the blame must rest also with the government. If the government decides that we are not going to allow our sovereignty or independence and territorial integrity to be trampled upon, which is really what it should be. I mean, I can tell you, this request come in the revolution, you know exactly what that response was going to be. A resounding no. There was no way, no form of fashion that the Grenadian people would have supported any kind of request like that if it had come during the period of the revolution, because in that period, we know the consciousness of the Grenadian people was one where you could hardly make a request like that. We were anti-imperialist, and we understood what anti-imperialism meant in that context, and we would have said no. And that is what one of the I guess intended in some respects and unintended consequences of the invasion of our country. Where now the philosophy of the invader has now become the philosophy of the country has become the philosophy of the invader. And so when we see something like this taking place and young people are not involved, we really can't blame them, because we have not done enough. First of all, in terms of really educating people about what the Grenada Revolution meant, what it meant for our sovereignty, what it meant for development, what it meant for everything. You know, Kenny might have a different view on that. But when we take the overall context of the revolution and what it meant for development, not only for Grenada, but for the Caribbean and the rest of the third world. Grenada was a beacon, a shining light for development all over the world. But people came here and saw what was taking place. It was not 5,000 people that were detained. It was like 3,200 people. So let's not exaggerate it as well. But at the same time, we know that that revolution was an example of what a small island state, poor third world country could do, even when we did not receive a single cent of help from the United States. So when Father Paul talks, I can identify with every sentiment that he has just expressed, because in that period, we survived with sanctions from the United States. We did not get any help from the United States. And we were able to survive. And not just survive, but we progressed more than we had progressed during the period of colonialism and under Gary. So for the naysayers and all of them who just focus only on the negatives of the revolution, let us focus on what example it brought us in terms of real development, what a poor, small country like Grenada, deprived of resources from the United States, who went out of its way to strangle us, that we could develop in spite of that. And so when a request like this comes, we have to say in no uncertain manner that we are for a zone of peace, not only now, since in the days of my grandfather, come right up to when our Prime Minister beautifully articulated that in every single forum, Prime Minister Maurice Bishop, that the Caribbean is a zone of peace and should remain a zone of peace. And just a little point I want to make with respect to how we parrot a lot of the propaganda that comes from the North. Okay, so we call Maduro a dictator. How many dictators are there around the world that the United States is not attacking? How many? The hegemony that the United States enjoys in the world, they can attack anybody that they want.
Well,
So
Salvador Allende was not a dictator either.
Exactly.
They got rid of him. He was
the oligarchy in Venezuela ill-treated the Venezuelan people much more than the Chavez Maduro government. You can't talk about ill-treatment, because this is the first time the people of Venezuela really got a share in the wealth of the country, and they're struggling desperately. Now, tell me what is different. Tell me what is different in the playbook that they're using against Maduro, painting him as a dictator, painting him as someone who is not on the side, representing the interests of the people, when in the very United States, the very government doesn't represent the interests of the majority of the people. 2% of the population controls all of the world. The rest of the people are struggling from day to day. And what is the difference between what is taking place right now in Venezuela by attacking them, using that playbook of demonizing them, building up this adverse propaganda that this is a country that needs to be dealt with? What is the difference between what they did with Saddam Hussein? In fact, only recently, a report came out, I saw it on NBC News for myself, that the United States entered the Vietnam War based on lies. And it is just about every single thing that they have done in recent times, where they have gotten rid of people who they consider as dictators. They got rid of Saddam Hussein. What did Saddam Hussein do? He controlled his people. Maybe he was a dictator, but are people in Saudi Arabia any different? What is the difference between what they did to Gaddafi? Gaddafi had a country that was well under control, never had a single cent of debt. The people in Libya live well. They live, a charmed life compared to what they're living right now, where is a failed state. And the common thread that runs through all of these countries: Syria, they attacked Syria. They control the wealth of Syria. All the oil fields of Syria were controlled by the American soldiers, even when Assad was there. So what are we talking about? What are we talking about? Is the playbook any different when it comes to Maduro? It's no different. They use that playbook, they build them up, and they're not overt about it. In fact, when the coalition was established a few days ago, we are on the assumption that it was based on, yes, what we consider in our gut that they want to attack Venezuela. But 2 days later, what happened? They announced it. And what they're behind the oil. Is just the oil, because Venezuela has the largest reserves of oil anywhere in the world, and that's what they want. So America has all the oil they want. They told themselves as one of the biggest exporters of oil in the world. They have so much oil, but why do you want other people's oil? Leave the people alone. This is their oil, yes, and they must control it as they see fit.
Yes. So, Dr. Marshall, I understand, before I get to Ms. Salal Singh, that you have a statement from the coalition. Again, and folks, we are also following some breaking news here. And the breaking news that we received upon coming on air is that the U.S., I suppose, I'm not sure if it's actually part of this military demand that they have made, but they're now asking Grenada to accept third country deportees. In other words, those are deportees from the United States that their home countries, the immigrants from those origin home countries, those countries will not accept them. They have again asked, or reporting understands, that they have asked the government of Grenada. Again, we're still waiting on a confirmation from the government of Grenada to determine whether or not they received that request, and I use the word request loosely here, editorially speaking, for Grenada to accept third country deportees. So, Dr. Marisha, over to you to please read that statement that I understand you have from the coalition.
Yes, again, this is information that the government has been hiding for us. We even know that even the request for the establishment of a base on Grenada had come several weeks ago. We only know it now because people have broken the news. Now news is being broken again. So the Coalition for a Zone of Peace has been reliably informed that the United States government has given an ultimatum to the government of Grenada to accept refugees of third world nationals that are being deported from the United States. The Coalition for a Zone of Peace calls for the government of Grenada to inform the people of Grenada as to whether this is a fact. If this is indeed the case, the people of Grenada must mobilize and organize to say a resounding no. On principle, Grenada will not support any inhumane U.S. immigration policy. Grenada is a small sovereign country, and we will not accept non-Grenadians as refugees to our shores, some of whom could be criminals. On this, the 19th of October, 2025, Grenadians, let us rally together to defend our principles, our sovereignty, our national pride and dignity. Grenada is not for sale. The Coalition for Zone of Peace is organizing several activities. On Wednesday, October the 22nd, 2025, a mass demonstration beginning at 4 p.m. at the Tantine roundabout, close to T.M. Marisha Community College, and will end at the Esplanade Mall. We have circulated a petition, and we are encouraging all Grenadians to support a strong no to the U.S. request for the establishment of a base. And we are organizing 2 candlelight vigils in Point Salines and Pearls on October the 25th, 2025. Let us unite to keep Grenada safe and free. Grenada and the Caribbean must remain a zone of peace. And another breaking news, Kellan,
yes,
that we have been reliably informed about is that the United States government is already pressuring Caribbean countries who are attending or who are going to be attending the General Assembly of the United Nations to vote against the resolution which calls for the removal of the criminal economic blockade against Cuba. Now we have indication that the Grenada government is either going to abstain or vote against. We don't know how they're going to vote, but then again, we need to put pressure on the government because of what Cuba has done for us, what Cuba has continued to do for us, to ensure that that vote remains constant, that there's no change in that vote ever. We are against that criminal economic blockade that Cuba has endured for well over 60 years, and we say enough is enough. Our vote is and always should be against the blockade. And this is another thing that is developing that we need to ventilate and ensure that the government takes the right position to be on the right side of history so that will never happen when that vote comes up at the next time.
Mr. Lansing, let me bring you in here. I want you to react to this breaking news that we got today. And again, just as a caveat, we are still waiting to get a formal statement from the government of Grenada. I did reach out to the press secretary this morning. I've not seen any responses from her as yet. But Mr. Lansing, I want you to react to this because, again, this is not only about requesting military assets, demanding military assets be placed at the Maurice Bishop International Airport. But this is also about really haranguing Grenada to get Grenada to accept third-party migrants. I remember Grenadians were up in arms when Haitian citizens were turned away at the Maurice Bishop International Airport. And those who said they should not have been turned away, a lot of them who are now saying today that, well, we cannot ruffle the feathers of the United States. I wonder what they would be saying about this request to not only for military installation at the airport, but for third-party migrants, for third country migrants. Mr. Lal Singh.
Yeah, before I answer this question directly, I just wanted to say, there's no country in the world that is totally dependent. We are all interdependent. I mean, if you look at the trade war that is going on now, China depends on the rest of the world. USA depends on the rest of the world. Some have consuming power. Some have the ability to develop and make things at a cheap price. So we in the small world, we are caught in the middle. We are caught in the middle, and we have to think of survival. While I don't agree, one, with setting up military strategic base in equipment in Grenada, and while I don't agree with receiving deportees from a third country, I don't agree with it. But I always look at the bigger picture. We might play hard-headed and big-headed and say no to this and no to that. But then they can put the economic squeeze on us. Can you imagine? The USA, no fish could be imported from Grenada come January. Fruits and vegetables, for whatever reason, you have to pay 50% tax. Because Grenada charges about 65% tax, 50 to 60 on things imported from the US. What happens if they do that? Then we are in serious economic trouble. The country will collapse. I believe, Kellan, what we need here, Kellan, what we need is diplomacy at work. We need to confront the US, sit with them, and have a dialogue. I think the level of dialogue with the government is very, very low. I don't think they have the ability, because it calls for negotiation with the US. But don't take no high-handed approach. You know, Father Paul talk about all that happening in the Middle East. The world was created with love and war, cousins fighting. That will never end. We will always have fighting. We will always have some getting the better end of it, because the world was created like that. What I am advocating is good diplomacy. I want my country to discuss with the US at a very high level how we can get around that. Added to that, Kellan, because Prime Minister to Venezuela recently, high-level visit, days, wearing the sash. I think that the US is only testing Grenada loyalty. But we also have to look at the background. Every Grenadian that went to Venezuela came back broke. They don't have anything. I know many Grenadians in Venezuela, they have nothing. They come here sometimes. You even have to give them something. But we know thousands and thousands of Grenadians in the US who have flourished, who have made millions.
Well, Mr. Lal Singh, I would push back on two things here. First and foremost, Grenadians who are in the United States, we have had to apply for visas. We have had to spend money to come here. And when we come to the US, we do not get a meal ticket. Okay, Mr. Lal Singh, we have to work hard to earn our keep in this country. So let us not, yes, the US has given us access to the country. But we
nothing is wrong with that.
Yes,
we work hard in Grenada too.
Correct.
We working hard in Grenada.
But I understand that, Mr. Lal Singh, but I think let us not, give the narrative that, well, yes, the US give us, that they're so benevolent, But on the question of, and I want to bring back Dr. Hines here, On the question, and Father Paul later, on the question of the statement, and Mr. Lansing, I want to pick up on what you said about the Prime Minister's recent trip to Venezuela. That was his first, by the way, as Prime Minister. Let us be transparent about this. And he's not the first Prime Minister of Grenada to visit Venezuela to be awarded. The former Prime Minister was also given the red carpet when he visited Venezuela as well. We have a Petro-Carib agreement with Venezuela. Venezuela built the La Colombe housing project. Many Grenadians benefited from scholarships from Venezuela. So I think we have to put this in proper context. But I found it interesting, Mr. Lansing, and Dr. Hines, I want to get your perspective on this, that the government of Grenada released a statement saying that they were going to be acting as an interlocutor between Venezuela and Grenada. Was that, Mr. Lansing, as someone who sat in cabinet, a bit short-sighted on the government's part?
Could you just repeat what they said? I didn't.
Yeah, they released a statement saying that they were going to be an interlocutor between the U.S. and Venezuela. Was that a short-sighted move by the government of Grenada to put themselves out there like that?
Well, not necessary. If we believe in peace, and we must create a certain dialogue. So I don't think anything is wrong with making proposals. Okay. I think the problem in Grenada, we don't follow up. We need to follow up and take decisive action in the way of finding peace and working as a community that want peace.
Okay. Dr. Hines, you've been hearing all of the gentlemen here. You've heard Father Paul. You've heard Mr. Lansing. You've heard this new development here with respect to an extra demand that has been placed on Grenada. So I want you to pick up on all of this, sir.
Yes, you know, if I may say something about the Grenada's role in mediating between the United States and Venezuela, I completely disagree with that move, and I think my thesis is grounded in the thing that that's not our role as small states. You know, Venezuela and America has their business. Let them carry on their business. Grenada has no business in that. And I take you back 40 years when the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan, and the Grenada, under the Grenadian Revolution, voted at the United Nations on the side of the Soviet Union. Now, I was a big supporter of the revolution at that time. I still am, but I felt that the Maurice Bishop regime was wrong to get involved in big countries' story. I think whether we have a revolution or don't have a revolution, that is not our place. We live in a geopolitical world, and I'm quoting David Rudd again, that don't need islands no more. We made them rich during the period of slavery and colonialism. And I think Mr. Lansing may have said it earlier. Mr. Marichaud, Dr. Marichaud, that they only need us at times like this. Mm-hmm. And so I am very strong on the thesis that countries like Grenada and those of us in the Anglophone Caribbean and further afield have no business in certain geopolitical issues. So I just wanted to say that.
Yes.
That thing. No, I think the point about the generational divide must not be missed. Mm-hmm. There is always a national cultural reaction to what the Americans are attempting to do to Grenada. And although the young people may not be articulating it, it doesn't mean that there's not a national cultural reaction that says, no, we ain't doing this. But they are going to express it in a non-expressive way. Okay. The ideology of anti-imperialism is not one that is overt these days for obvious reasons, because imperialism operates differently than it did in the 1970s and the 1980s. But there's still that national cultural reaction. And I'm hearing it from my co-panelists here, and I share it. The point is that 40 years on from the revolution, the geopolitical space manifests itself in a different way. And we of the left, we anti-imperialists, have to find creative ways of expressing our anti-imperialism, of expressing our national cultural reaction. And so I am with Mr. Lal Singh on this. I think that we have to have that national cultural reaction that says no. But we have to be realistic that saying no comes with consequences. And we have to be able to anticipate those consequences and put that on the table too. So you have the national cultural reaction that says no. But you also have a reaction that says, but we have to survive. After the United States would have done what they did in Venezuela and get what they want and go their way, we have to survive. And we have to survive here with Venezuela. We have to survive with the United States. We have to survive with China. And so therefore, we have to be constantly saying no, but also saying, how are we going to live in this situation? I'm a Calypsonian student, so bear with me. The mighty sparrow in I Am a Slave said, every time I try to escape, I see the slave master there with the whip and the dogs, and my blood run cold. But every time he beat me, I think and I'm thinking about a brilliant escape. So it's the question of resistance and survival. Resistance has to be natural to us as Caribbean people. Survival is also natural. And so we have to find a way to balance resistance with survival, because that is how we overcame enslavement. That is how we overcame colonialism. That is how we have survived and in certain way live with neocolonialism whenever we have balanced resistance with survival. And so my plea here today is that as we confront this new hegemonic era, we have to put in place that ethos of balancing resistance with survival.
Balancing resistance with survival and diplomacy. Again, Dr. Hines, how does the Caribbean engage in diplomacy with the current White House occupant?
Very.
That is the greatest open book test of all time.
Very practical question. And I think this is where our greatest weapon comes into play, and that is regionalism. I am not satisfied with the state of our regional project, but regionalism has always led the way. Please remember that when the I don't know if Mr. Marichaud was at that meeting, Dr. Marichaud's grandfather, he might have been. When they came back from a trade union conference, I think in 1919, these trade unionists, Critchlow and others, I think Marichaud was with them. They came back, they began to talk about Caribbean independence. They weren't talking about Grenadian independence and Guyanese and Barbadian independence. They were talking about Caribbean independence. And so the point I am making here is that we won independence as the Caribbean. The 1930s so-called riots of the 1930s, which were really labor uprising led by those trade union leaders, was what really put the last nail in the coffin of colonialism in a formal way. And so I am arguing here that this issue may rest with Venezuela Grenada as a sovereign, but really it's a Caribbean issue. I was happy to see CARICOM issue a statement, but I'm arguing here that CARICOM has to do more than issue a statement. CARICOM has to give cover to Grenada. Now, it's interesting that Antigua and Barbuda has come out and said not here, all right?
Well, except, yeah, it's easy for them to say that because they were not demanded off to have military assets installed at VC Bird International Airport. So Gaston Brown could say whatever he wants to say.
Yes,
and I'm sure he's please, yes, go ahead,
yes,
Doctor.
I'm getting to that. You're correct. He's anticipating. And so, in a sense, he's playing political checkers, right?
Yeah.
My point here is that the Caribbean CARICOM has to give Grenada cover on this issue. If we're going to say no, let us say no together. If we are going to say yes, let us say yes together. If we're going to negotiate, let us negotiate together. In that way, you soften the retaliation if there's going to be retaliation, or you soften the retaliation on Grenada. So we are constantly having to grapple with the complexity of our being. We are small states, have always been small states, but we have always been in the middle. Dr. Williams wrote Capitalism and Slavery, in which he argued that British and European capitalism was built on the labor and the sweat of our people in the Caribbean. That was his thesis. Small states, but very, very complex. And it means that when we confront these issues, we must do so as a complex people who have had a complex history and are capable intellectually and politically to overcome these issues. So that is really my plea here. We have different levels of engagement, the national cultural reaction, diplomacy, all of that fit in. But at the end of the day, when this is over, we have to survive in the Caribbean and prepare for the next upgrade of the Monroe Doctrine. And I end by saying, as we reflect on the Grenadian Revolution, I repeat, what the Grenadian Revolution, it meant many things to many people. If you put me in prison, I'm going to glorify you. And that's why I understand Mr. Lal Singh and others' position. But the revolution is itself was a complex undertaking. And like I said, what that revolution did was to give us a brief period when our sovereignty meant something. As somebody said, Dr. Marichaud said, if this question was asked during the revolution, the answer would have been overwhelmingly no. Because at that time, our sovereignty had moved up a little. Since the end of that Grenadian Revolution, our sovereignty has declined considerably. And so we are really fighting a war of sovereignty with a very, very fragile sovereign space.
Father Paul, I do want to bring you back here, but we do have to come up for air, and we have to get to the breaking development that occurred in Trinidad and Tobago yesterday with respect to...
Mr. Bob, Dr. Bob?
Yes, Father Paul.
Yes, the volume has been very, very low. I don't know if there's anything you could control, because I have my phone full up and I'm struggling to hear that. The interesting encounter that is going on.
Yeah, we will take a quick break, Father Paul, and then we will get back to you shortly, okay?
Wonderful.
Yes, so folks, we'll take a quick break now, come up for air, get to closing comments from our guests because we have to get to the next segment. Stand by.
Should your loved ones pass on, they deserve to be treated with dignity. And at S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, we can provide you with that service. We can take you every step of the way during your sorrowful moments. When that need arises, call S.A. Johnson Funeral Home at 347-777-9797. That's 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home is a Caribbean family-owned funeral home here in Brooklyn, providing funeral services, but in a dignified way. From cremation to burial to the repatriation of your loved ones, you don't have to go through the hassle, as we provide exceptional service that allows you to mourn and heal peacefully. For more information, visit our website, www.sajohnsonfuneral.org. Send us an email at sajfuneral@aol.com or call 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, because you deserve to be treated with dignity.
Hi everyone, thanks for checking out the Bub Report's social media pages. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch our weekly live show, follow our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages. And also subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can catch repeat episodes on Wednesdays at 4 and 5 p.m. respectively on CRFM Radio and GBN TV in Grenada. We are also viewed on Sundays at 8 p.m. on WPG10 throughout the Caribbean. Thanks for watching. And folks, welcome back to this week's edition of the Bub Report. But Father Paul, I want to pick up this conversation with you as we get to closing comments. Of course, you've articulated your view, an emphatic no. Dr. Hines has articulated a much more, shall we say, pragmatic view, as has Mr. Lal Singh. But you said that you will minus your support from the Deacon Mitchell, from Deacon Mitchell, if he agrees to this, to any of these. Where should the faith-based community, Father Paul, in your view, stand on this? Because rest assured, if there was a rainbow-colored cruise ship calling in Port St. George's, every single Grenadian will be out on the street calling for that ship to be turned away. But in closing, I want to get your closing comments on sort of the faith-based approach to all of this, Father.
Okay, let me try to be concise on that. It's difficult to be. The thing is that our faith as Christians are biblically based, and it's, oh my God, it's so much to say, but I'll be try to be very concise. Any serious or level-minded faith-based group of people in Grenada or anywhere should be pushing back against imperialism, against colonialism, against the exploitation of human beings by other human beings. Because it's all there in the scriptures. I give you one text, for example, Amos 5, 23, I think, 21 to 23 or 24, says, I don't want to hear any more of your great assemblies and your strumming, your harp and your pipe organs and your singing. What I want is justice to flow in the land like an ever-flowing river. The scriptures are based on two pillars, the pillar of justice and the pillar of mercy. We know that even in the code, the worst criminal is given mercy. Somebody comes and say, look at the circumstances that man grew up in. His mother used to beat him so bad, or he had a bad father, or whatever. Scripture is based on justice and mercy. And any situation that creates injustice, that prolongs injustice, ought to be condemned. And so you would give me the opportunity to push back on a lot of things, a number of things that my brother Lal Singh said. He said the world was created with what, boy? Anybody remembers now? The world was created...
love and peace, you said, Mr. Lal Singh? Love and
No, peace and war, I think.
Peace and war, yes.
Peace and war. That's not true. That's not true. The world was not created. When God created the world, he saw it was good. Man introduced war in the world. So don't talk as if war is a normalized state. And we have to keep on always pushing back against war. We cannot begin to psychologically say, well, that is how life be, that's how life would always be. You also say they were, and these are my words now, they were always haves and not haves not. You know, well, Mr. Lal Singh could say that because Mr. Lal Singh is not without. You know, it reminds me of an old church hymn. I don't think it was Catholic though. An old church hymn that said, the rich man in his castle, the poor man at his gate. God made them highly and lowly and ordered their estate. Now that's what the exploiters do. They bring it even in our theology. So you have a song saying, you have a hymn saying that God created some people to be rich and God created some people to be poor. Nothing like that. The divisions, the disparity between rich and poor. I mean, under Obama, wealth was transferred to the richest few. Under Trump, in his first administration, in his present administration, and you always squeeze in those who don't have to give those. Now, what God has to do with that? God has absolutely nothing to do with that. On the case of Grenada being an interlocutor between Grenada and between the United States and Venezuela, I agree with that. I also want to make the point quickly, and I think others made it, that we cannot betray our heroes by saying yes to Venezuela today. Then he talked about the diplomacy. Diplomacy, yes, but you always have, your diplomacy always have an end. It always have positions that you would not compromise. There's values that you would not compromise. So to say, well, we go and have a nice dialogue with Trump, and then afterwards, well, things going to work out. Yes, we're going to dialogue. I am all for dialogue. But you have uncompromising positions that you're not moving from. Because if Trump comes, when he comes, if he going to talk to Grenada in that diplomatic way, if he chooses, they're going to listen to all we say and then tell and put the demand before you afterwards. That's exactly what they're going to do. My brother Heinz, I really like your thinking on many of the points that you raised, but I disagree with you about when something happening between big country and small country, we must stay out of that because we're small. That's a diplomatic approach. But in the situation that Grenada faces today, you yourself just made the point that CARICOM should be able, it would have been a wonderful thing if CARICOM were able to unite and offer us solidarity in this situation. We are brothers and sisters, whether big or small. We need solidarity. We need people to support us. We need people to support the right, and we need to support the right. So I don't quite agree. You know, there is a saying that, you know, when rockstone dancing, you as a little sunflower, don't remember the exact term, should not find yourself between them. I disagree with that. There are things that are wrong and there are things that are right. There are positions that are morally reprehensible, and we must not compromise. The situation with Gaza, we can't say, well, you know, Gaza and them, Israel big and America big. We can't really get into this thing that's going to affect our country. And that's precisely what the Caribbean did. I never heard a statement from Grenada about the Gaza situation. I don't know if one was ever made, but I never heard. I never heard anything. I never heard anything. Okay? So, yes, and just one other point. Dr. Heinz, I will tell you my number now. I would really like you to get in touch with me. My number is 405-4557. 405-4557. We can continue the dialogue, you know. I want to make the point as well. Mr. Lansing was, my brother Mr. Lansing was speaking in a manner as if, boy, don't, we are being hot-headed, Father Paul, and maybe Mr. Dr. Heinz are being hot-headed because we want to strengthen, you know, broaden our chest and challenge the United States and so on, you know, and that shouldn't be the approach. I want to say to you and to the audience that struggle is not completed in a day, in a generation, or in an era. The struggle for righteousness, the struggle for justice, the struggle for peace, the struggle for harmony and so on is not something that stands with any one generation. It's something that goes across generation. It is an eternal struggle. And if I have to die and you have to die in the process, you would have done what you're supposed to do to continue the struggle. Our heroes, Dr. Heinz was making the point earlier on, all the great heroes who fought for independence, Bustamante and all these guys and that. Oh my God, Nelson Mandela all these years in prison, and not only Nelson Mandela, we call Nelson Mandela all the time. There were scores upon scores of freedom fighters in South Africa who were doing exactly what Nelson Mandela was doing. And he's dead and gone. He comes out for a few years and he's dead and gone. But what he has done, nothing could erase what Nelson Mandela and the people thereafter, those who were with him, have done. Today in South Africa, I'm not never impressed by the South African government, for example. Look at, up to now, Black South Africans remain poor. There has been no land reform, no land redistribution. These people came and take these people land and they remain poor. They remain poor up to date. So I am supporting Malema, for example. And Malema might die without overthrowing the ANC, which I supported all my life as a child. He might die, but his struggle is a very, very important struggle. So struggle is a cross. We cannot just be looking selfishly at our own lives and what to be achieved in the course of my life and what is going to be against my interests to put my hand up and make a bold statement, my personal interest in this. No, we have to be far better than that. You look at struggles all around the world, the struggles of the Mau people in Kenya, who the British just killed and killed and killed. The Algerian struggle. The Algerians fought for their independence against the French. They died in their millions, but they have accomplished what they have accomplished. And nothing in history could ever erase that. And, you know, I am a Christian. I am a believer. How could I sit around in the world? As I said in my song on Gaza, huh? How could I sit? How could I sleep peacefully at night while genocide goes on? I don't know how people do that. I don't know how church leaders pretend that a genocide is not going on, you know, and will punish me for speaking out against the church shutting up its mouth during a genocide. They suspend me and they try to get rid of me. I'm not trying to personalize the thing. I'm just giving an example. I don't know how people do that. How, you know, during the years of the genocide, and it continues, I find it very difficult to eat because children in Gaza don't even get baby formula, no food. They're dying of starvation. And I'm eating meals and just like nothing, nobody's business. Personally, from where I stand, and if you, Mr. Lal Singh, or anybody call yourself a Christian, I would not call such people a Christian. Anybody who could sit and see suffering imposed upon a people and say, well, you know, boy, a shading the blows, a hiding in a corner. That, I am profoundly against it. So that's the points I think I wanted to make. The lives of our, the sacrifices and the blood of our heroes and heroes throughout eternity were never wasted, And if any one of us think the sum total of our life is in accumulation of material things, which we're going to die in any case. Alexander the Great, when he died, he said, put my hands open. You know, I have come into the world. I conquered the whole world. I came into the world and I'm leaving the world with nothing. If we think the sum total of our life and the grandeur and the great high points of our lives is to achieve this and to achieve that and to achieve the other and don't look out for our brothers and sisters, I think we are in a very sad situation. Thank you very much.
Father Paul, thank you so much. I will quickly go over now to Dr. Marisha for some closing comments. And then we'll go to Dr. Hines and Mr. Lal Singh after. Dr. Marisha.
Yes, Kalan. Let me just say
activities, that I want you to frame this in the context of the activities that will be happening this week.
Right. Let me say that I agree with various aspects of the contributions of the other three panelists. I believe that what Father Paul has said in terms of the necessity for a national dialogue is an imperative. That the government should not go out there and make any kind of decision as it relates to this particular issue without proper consultation with the people. I do believe that people's power can stop this problem. Because if the Grenadians show in no uncertain manner that they do not want a military base or military assets on our soil, the government has to respect the will of the people, just as it has to respect the will of the people when it comes to not welcoming or accepting refugees or people from ICE onto our shores because the Americans say that we should accept them. In fact, the government has responded and they said that they will accept people as long as it's skilled workers. We don't believe in that at all. They should not accept anybody at all. In the same way that we had dialogue over the Cuban medical problem, or it's a problem not only for the United States, but for us it was never a problem. But in the same way we sat down and discussed this problem with them, I think, as Dr. Hines has said, we need to sit down and discuss this problem again with the United States. We believe that dialogue is imperative, and we can beat our chest and say, okay, we're sovereign and we're not adhering or conceding to anything that the United States forces on us. Very often we don't have much of a choice. But I do believe that our sovereignty and our independence are things that are sacred. And just as how Dr. Hines said that Morris Bishop raised our nose in the time of the revolution and showed us what sovereignty was all about. Imagine a small country like Grenada leading the way again, as we had done during the period of the Federation, when we showed that the only way for real, progress and prosperity in the Caribbean is through federation. And we allowed that to slip through our fingers, and then the Europeans adopted it. They used the very framework of our independence and our quest for federation to build the European Union. Now we are saying that our sovereignty is important. And if Morris Bishop showed us what was possible, we owe it to him and to the ideals of the Grenada Revolution to continue to fight for that sovereignty, even though we're small. The world is no longer a unipolar world. The world is changing. There's a realignment of forces in the world. And what America is doing now is tantamount to what many experts like Wolf and Mersheim and all these people, Jeffrey Sachs and all of these noted people who speak about the collapse of the empire. What is coming now? The American empire is collapsing. Is like the kick from a dying bull. That's what is taking place right now. And so this realignment of forces is going to have benefits for Grenada in the future. We might have to go through a rough period if we say no. Yes, we might have to go through a rough period. But in the end, I think the means will justify the ends. We need to stand up and say we are not accepting any kind of dictate in this time. And finally, even to agree with Kenny, who we don't really see eye to eye on much things, that he has called for the use of the force. He doesn't support the use of force to remove any government. Well, that has been the playbook of the United States we can name example after example in our history over the last 70 years and see that is their playbook. And I totally agree with that low force should be used to remove the Maduro government. It should be done, again, through dialogue, through coming together, sitting at the table, and ventilating your views back and forth. The United States doesn't subscribe to that most of the time. They just get into things, they lie, they distort information, and then they get in, and then we just have to go along with it. We are now at a historical juncture where we need to prevent that from happening. Right here in Grenada, in terms of the demands that are being made on us, and internationally, we can play a role, not because we're small, we can also play a role in terms of saying, no, what if the Caribbean stands up and decides that we do not want military assets in our region because we are adamant that the Caribbean must be declared a zone of peace and must be respected as a zone of peace? It will have to be that. And they'll be seen for what they are if they decide to disturb that peace as they have disturbed it in 1983 in Grenada. Just as how they disturbed it again in 1915 in Haiti, when they invaded Haiti. And in the Bay of Pigs in 1962. They will try it anymore, but these days, because of public pressure, we can do so. And I just want to say one last thing. The posture of the current Prime Minister, that the Caribbean is not a zone of peace, is not in keeping with the policies and the spirit of Chagaramas when Michael Manley, Errol Barrow, force one came together, and they too declared the Caribbean as a zone of peace. This is an ideal that we hold dear to our hearts and continue to strive for. Her posture clearly reflects that of a backward politician with a disgrace to CARICOM. And even with this latest declaration from CARICOM on this issue, although they didn't go far enough as far as I'm concerned, in condemning the extrajudicial killings that are taking place in Caribbean waters right now. But even as soft as it is, she expressed reservations to that declaration. So her posture clearly reflects that of a backward politician with a disgrace to CARICOM. And she should be ashamed of herself for denigrating the ideas and the ideals of these great men who stood up and fought against the colonial masters. So we're in a critical juncture in our history right now. And I think on this anniversary of the death of Maurice Bishop, one of the greatest heroes as far as I'm concerned, not only in Grenada, I saw somebody the other day referring to him as one of the great leaders of the world, and I believe that myself, that we should not cow to the demands of the United States. This is 2025. This is not even 1979 to 1983. This is 2025, and we need to stand up now. If we don't stand up, well, we know what the result will be. It's time to defend our sovereignty, our independence and territorial integrity. And again, I call in on Grenadians. Come out on Wednesday, let us start that march. I call to them to support the petition. I call on the government not to accede to this request for refugees to be brought onto our soil, because we have our own problems with housing. And we finally call, when the vote comes up in the United Nations on the removal of the criminal economic blockade against Cuba, that we must vote again with Cuba and not with the United States. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Marichaud. Dr. Hines, over to you, sir, for some closing comments.
Yes, I want to pick up from where Dr. Marichaud left off. You know, in this October month, Grenada and the rest of us in the Anglophone Caribbean cannot say yes to the United States. We just cannot say. To say yes is to beat back everything that we have represented from the Middle Passage and even before the Middle Passage coming right through. We have to say no. I think I've been talking about the national cultural reaction, and I deliberately put in cultural because it's not just a political reaction, it's a cultural reaction. We have to say no. And as we say no, we must do so armed with an alternative. We are tasked at this juncture, because as I began my remarks earlier, we're saying that we are in the face of a new world order. Trump and his government is going to go in a couple of years, but the United States will continue on this trajectory. It's very clear where they're going. But we have the opportunity very early on in this new world order, because we are now sovereign states, at least in theory, as this new world order is taking root. We have a chance to carve out a Caribbean ethos to deal with this new world order. And so therefore, if we can reach for all the ideological traits in our society, and we are a plural society, even when one ideology was dominant, we were still plural. And so there, if we can reach for our plurality, our cultural plurality, or ideological plurality, to confront what we are facing now, and in the process shape something that we can leave for future generations to deal with the might of the world. Now, let me end by saying this. I completely agree with Dr. Marichaud and the Committee for the Zone of Peace in Grenada that there should be consultation. One of the great legacies of the revolution was that it made true something about our praxis in the Caribbean that came out of slavery. because at emancipation, our enslaved foreparents sat around the fire, sat where they could sit, and they planned for post-emancipation. That is why they came out of emancipation, and they built communities. They built their churches and their schools and their economies and their governments. And they did so because they consulted with each other. You could still hear the old lady in the midst, picnic, bush got A's. Picnic, bush got A's. Children, we are planning, but the enemy may be at the gate, planning, consulting. And the Grenadian Revolution brought that praxis into government. One of the things they did is to deepen consultation among people on the issue. Again, I'm sensitive because there were excesses of the revolution, and one has to be sensitive to that. But that whole notion of consultation was very central to the praxis of that government. And so if we can invoke that today, if the government of Grenada can invoke the praxis of people's consultations, people's assemblies, whatever you call them. You may not want to call them assemblies because it sounds like the revolution, but bringing people together in their spaces, in their workplaces, in their communities, and say, here is the large question of our time. Tell us what to do. We would be doing a great service to our long history of resistance, creativity, and survival as one of the great civilizations of the world, the Caribbean civilization.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hines. Mr. Lal Singh, over to you, sir, on this very red letter day in Grenadian history for some closing comments. And of course, for you, as we said at the start of the program, you view this day differently for obviously different reasons. Sir.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think today has brought a good cross-section of different views.
Yes.
Which is very healthy for people to try and understand Grenada and what has taken place. Now, if Maurice Bishop was the greatest leader in the world, then the Maurice Bishop patriotic movement would have been the government of Grenada from day one. The mere fact that it was rejected, it means something. I don't know what it means, because there were good people leading it. But yet for all, people did not gravitate to the Maurice Bishop patriotic movement because it was named Maurice. If that is so, they should have voted. They didn't. So I want to say he was the greatest. The other thing Dr. Hines said is the revolution, I mean, he admitted that there were excesses. The revolution brought people to a point where we had dialogue and discussion. During the revolution, as soon as you differ with them, is Richmond Hill you're going. That's what they did. They didn't want any opposition. The revolution decided, you cannot go against me. I'm going to lock you up. I am the power. Dr. Hines also said that Maurice Bishop voted for the Soviet at a time when he believed they shouldn't have. But Dr. Hines, Maurice Bishop could not have done anything different because his bread and butter was coming from the Soviet bloc. And they dictated to him. They dictated to him, that is how you have to vote. He had no choice because he didn't know where to turn. The economy in Grenada was crumbling. They could not fix anything in Grenada except the handouts from the Soviet Union and Cuba. So, you know, to try and paint the period of the revolution as something that made a difference in Grenada, no, it wasn't. It made a difference to make people worse off, you know. So we will always have different views. You know, when I said earlier on that that's how the world was created, I looked at it in the Bible. I believe God created this world, and he created all the areas of thinking. He said to us, we can think good, we can think bad, we can fight wars, These are all the things we could do, but we must choose what we think is best. And that's what's happening up to today. Some people choose the wrong side. Exactly, they will get the wrong result. Focusing back on today. Today is a very important day. I don't see it as Heroes Day. I don't see it as Heroes Day. I see it as a day of reflection. A day we should reflect. A day when we should be praising the Lord for what has taken place during the revolution in life and today, bringing an end to a revolution that crippled Grenada. Grenada was not going anywhere whatsoever. And so I see today not as Heroes Day. I believe if the government want to name Heroes Day, they should have named March 19th. That's the day of Gary's uprising to bring benefit. Because I believe that Gary is still, although Gary had some excesses in his last few years, and he created his own demise, I believe firmly that Eric Gary is the #1 hero. Eric Gary is the one who brought to the people of Grenada an end to a lot of suffering. So he's the #1, and I believe that Heroes Day should be March 19th, when he staged it in 1951, and not October 19th. I believe the government should leave October 19th for the remnants of the PRG to pray for Morris. And I believe all of us should pray, because there were a lot of innocent people who usually the innocent who lie. They are followers. 90% of people are followers in the world. They follow who they like. And you see today, there's some people who don't believe in what Trump doing, but they're enjoying a nice position. So they are there, and they're doing it, and they're following. I would urge my government, in closing, I would urge them to do two things. Dialogue with the people of Grenada, but at the end of the day, you ought to make the right decision. I would advise them to develop a professional approach with the government of the USA. I think we're too laid back. We need to go forward, and instead of going Africa and all them places, we need to confront the US and say to them, look, we need to protect our country and our people. We really don't need any base in Grenada. We really don't need to take deportees from other country. But you are demanding of us. And we believe if we don't do it, you're going to destroy us economically. In that case, are you going to give us X, Y, Z? We are going to make some demands. If we have to succumb to your requests, these are the things that we want. And put a package to the US. But I believe that the present government is don't seem to have the ability to do things like that. But more importantly, I think CARICOM is showing its total failure in developing an organization. Now, the man in Antigua, the PM in Antigua, PM in St. Vincent, they are not helping Grenada by opening them out and saying, nobody could come to my country and set up anything. We are not having it. I think they're just setting up Grenada. They're not showing leadership. And that's where CARICOM. But of course, I've always concluded that CARICOM has been a failed organization, and we're wasting a lot of money in it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lal Singh. Viewers and listeners, we've certainly gone over time for this segment. So we'll take a quick break because we've had our last guest here waiting for almost an hour now. Jensen, apologies for having you waiting so long. But what we will do is to take a final break of the day. And of course, as we do, I do want to bring to viewers your attention this book. Of course, today is October 19th. We know the history of the day, titled The Assassination of Morris Bishop. As you know, I'm an avid reader. I got my copy this year. It's written by Godfrey Smith. Of course, and he says The trial of the Grenada 17 for the assassination of Morris Bishop, the popular leader of the Grenada Revolution, though resulting in a guilty verdict for all of them, left many unanswered questions. Among those questions were, who ordered the killing and where was the body taken? Now, after close to 4 decades comes an authoritative work that, while not claiming to provide all the answers, sheds new and credible light on the tragedy which unfolded on that fateful day in October 1983, of course, October 19th, 42 years later today, and the chilling sequence of events that perpetuated them. This is a page turner, folks. It really is. So if you can get that copy, that would be good. So we take our final break now and come back with our final guest of the day. Please stand by.
Should your loved ones pass on, they deserve to be treated with dignity. And at S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, we can provide you with that service. We can take you every step of the way during your sorrowful moments. When that need arises, call S.A. Johnson Funeral Home at 347-777-9797. That's 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home is a Caribbean family-owned funeral home here in Brooklyn, providing funeral services, but in a dignified way. From cremation to burial to the repatriation of your loved ones, you don't have to go through the hassle, as we provide exceptional service that allows you to mourn and heal peacefully. For more information, visit our website, www.sajohnsonfuneral.org. Send us an email at sajfuneral@aol.com or call 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, because you deserve to be treated with dignity.
And folks, welcome back to the final segment of the program. Now, we're going to take our lenses to neighbors to the South Trinidad and Tobago. Now, family members and neighbors have identified 2 men from Trinidad and Tobago who are believed to be among 6 people killed in a U.S. airstrike on a boat, allegedly, according to the U.S., without providing any evidence, transporting drugs from Venezuela. Of course, the regime in Washington said that's last Tuesday that the strike in international waters had killed 6, quote, narco-terrorists, and claimed that intelligence confirmed the vessel was trafficking narcotics, unquote. And it was, according to them, quote, associated with illicit narco-terrorist networks, unquote, again, without providing any evidence. Now, Trinidad and Tobago police said they were still confirming whether Trinidadians were among the deceased, but residents of the North Coast village of Las Cuevas told, that's the Guardian, I believe, Guardian newspaper in England, that 2 locals, Chad Chapo Joseph and Rishi Samaru, were on the sunken vessel. Now, at least 27 people have been killed so far in such attacks off the coast of Venezuela, with the regime in Washington says are necessary to protect the United States from narcotics smuggled from Venezuela. Now, here to make sense of these developments is a media colleague of mine, neighboring media colleague of mine, Jensen Levine. Jensen, welcome to the Bub Report. Of course, you're joining us from Trinidad and Tobago.
Hey, good morning. Well, afternoon.
It's afternoon now. Yes, apologies for the wait, sir. It's been a long program today. But Jensen, we caught wind of your reporting on the deceased fishermen. Now, I want to begin, even before we get into that conversation, I'm not sure if you've been following the story with respect to the alert that the U.S. Embassy put out to advise their citizens to stay away from the U.S. Embassy in Trinidad and Tobago. Has the government added any public statements on what is happening there? Trinidad is in a heightened state of alert. Why? Did they say anything?
No, they haven't said anything. The Prime Minister is quoted as saying, speak to the U.S. because they are the ones who issued the advisory. And that's it. It was a 1-sentence text message to one of my colleagues. And that's about it. The Minister of Homeland Security is saying, don't panic. I don't know what what assurances outside of don't panic he's giving, but there are more questions than answers right now. I don't think the general population is afraid. They're just concerned and a bit worried as to what exactly is going on. Why would the US issue such a statement? And why isn't the government saying anything about it?
And of course, this is happening against the backdrop of the Diwali celebrations, which is currently ongoing. So has that affected any of the celebrations? Are celebrations going out as normal?
Not at all. And that is one of the issues that is being raised right now, because leading up to the Independence Day celebration, the government came and said that there was some viable information that ministers and others were being threatened, their lives were being threatened, and therefore the Independence Day celebration had to be cancelled. Now we have this where the US is issuing a statement, and a statement that seems to have that is carrying a lot of weight, especially what they are saying. Stay away. They're warning their citizens, stay away from our areas. We have never seen anything like this before. I've never seen in my 15 plus years in the media, the US Embassy issuing a statement telling their members, telling their citizens, don't come to us. And we're not hearing anything from the government. We're not hearing anything outside of it's a heightened alert. The police is saying this, not the ministry. The police is saying there's a heightened alert. We are increasing our security apparatus, and the government is so far quite mum on this, which is alarming.
But there's also a state of emergency, correct? Has that state of emergency been lifted, or is that still in place?
State of emergency. It should be ending in. It started in July the 18th. It was given 2 weeks first, and then after the 2 weeks, 3 months. So let's say at the end of July, so August, September, October. The end of October, early November, it's supposed to come to an end.
Okay. Now, let us get to your reporting on one of the deceased fishermen. I believe you reported on, I believe that's the first gentleman. What's his, is that Chapo you reported on? Yes?
Yeah.
Chad Joseph? Yes. So talk to us about your reporting in The Guardian on this. How did the family, first and foremost, get wind, get confirmation that, in fact, that it was, in fact, Chapo and the other gentlemen who were on that vessel that was blown up by the United States?
That question needs to be posed to them again. I spoke with the grandmother, the grandfather, the mother, and 2 cousins, and none of them could have given me a direct answer as to how they knew for sure it was Chad, but they all believe. The grandmother said she heard it from her granddaughter, which is Chad's cousin. That cousin, she heard it from another cousin. I spoke to that cousin who said she heard it from social media people telling her. So she wasn't direct into who gave her the information. The mother told me she heard it from people. So everybody is hearing from others. But one thing they have all said is that he spent some time in Venezuela, a couple of months in Venezuela. So there's some, at least on my part, there's an understanding that there would have been some sort of communication between him and the people who you're staying with in Venezuela and the relatives. So I suspect that either him or the people in Venezuela would have told the family members he is heading to Trinidad, or he's coming back home, and so on. Look out for him. And they were looking out and they didn't see him, and they realized this incident happened. 1 + 1 = kaboom.
So that they have made some circumstantial, I guess, piecing together of events. But was he in direct communication with the family, saying that he was on his way back to Trinidad?
Not only from what the information I gathered, not on the day itself, at least they didn't tell me that. But the grandmother said that the mother spoke with him a couple of days before he left to come back to Trinidad. So there was some direct communication leading up to his return. Whether or not there was direct communication on the day of the return, nobody expressed that. But there definitely was some communication as to leading up to his return.
Right. But I want us to contextualize, because the closeness of Trinidad to Venezuela is very significant. And there has always been that cross-border interaction between Trinis going to Venezuela, Venis going to Trinidad, and so on. So can you contextualize that for us, please? so that our audience in Grenada can get an appreciation of just the extent of traffic, maritime traffic that happens between the two countries.
Yeah, even before the Great Migration in 2017, 2018, when a lot of Venezuelans were coming not only to Trinidad, but across the Caribbean and North America, well, not North, South and Central America, there was always this traversing between Venezuela and Trinidad and Tobago, be it for legal or illegal reasons. And those transport were obviously illegal. A lot of people were just taking fishing boat and coming to Venezuela, spending some time and coming back. It was a fun time. Again, this was both legal and illegal, and no matter who you ask, they will tell you that. So this issue of Trinis in Venezuela for extensive period is nothing new. So him being there is not a shocker, at least for nobody in Trinidad and Tobago.
Right.
Unless you obviously have no idea what's going on. But that has been happening for decades.
Time immemorial, yes, of course.
Him being there wasn't necessarily a red flag, because there are some law-abiding citizens who just probably can't afford to hop on a plane, don't have a passport, but they do have a friend or cousin with a fishing boat with links to Venezuela and would like to travel the world. I mean, if you could come to another country for free, wouldn't you take it? And that has been happening for some time. One of the issues you must put in here, he was at one point in time charged for trafficking drugs. I'm not sure if it's marijuana or cocaine, but this was back in 2018. So a lot of people will come out and say, well, he was charged with that back then obviously what he was doing now was illegal. And we all know that's not necessarily true. Not because I broke the law yesterday means I'm breaking the law again today. Yesterday, today, it's today. And even if that was the case, his death or suspected, believed death should not have been based strictly on the assumption or the presumption that he was doing something illegal.
Presumption of guilt until proven innocent? I mean, that's not how the justice system works. At least the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago is an attorney. She should know this. But I digress. Go ahead, please.
Well, she's an attorney. Our defense minister is also an attorney, not senior counsel, but senior in terms of years.
Well, she's even a senior counsel. That part.
Yeah. That's the thing. The four main people involved in this are all within the realm of law enforcement. As far as I know, the Foreign Affairs Minister, Sean Sobers, if not a practicing attorney, has a law degree. I stand to be corrected on that. The Minister of Homeland Security is a former police officer, so he's supposed to have an understanding of the law and the way things work. As you mentioned, our Prime Minister is a senior counsel, albeit not a criminal attorney from my recollection, still a senior member of the bar, and the Defense Minister, a senior defense attorney, who himself would have defended against alleged murderers for instances where the police may have overstepped their boundaries in arresting and charging these people. So for that cadre of people to be now mum and seemingly supporting what can only be described as extrajudicial killings is a bit concerning. It's somewhat disheartening, because if you have them saying that about this situation, then they ought not to say anything if there's ever a report of an extrajudicial killing involving our local officers in Trinidad and Tobago. As a matter of fact, there was some time ago during the whole migration issue where the Coast Guard officers would have opened fire on a fishing vessel from Venezuelans coming to Trinidad and Tobago, and a child was killed. And the Prime Minister, who was then opposition leader, was vociferous about this. We need to investigate this. How could this happen? Why is the Coast Guard firing on supposedly unarmed vessels? You were speaking loudly then about that, but you're very quiet about the death or the supposed, because we still, as many are saying, we have no physical evidence to prove, save and except for the family members saying that these men were killed, that 2 Trinidadian nationals were killed, and there was no just due. There was no arrest, there was no trial, there was no nothing. And even to the day, there's no evidence to support, even if you were to go with the argument they were trafficking drugs, there is no evidence to support that they were actually trafficking drugs. Even Even worse, the most recent incident where there were 2 survivors, the US is saying, I will send them back to their countries, not I will charge them for trafficking or attempting to traffic drugs.
Correct, and they did not. No charges were laid. They were not Mirandized. Nothing. Let's just send them back.
Yeah,
And we are expected to believe that narrative. But go ahead, please.
Yeah, and that adds to the fuel. And the opposition is saying something must be said. And your previous guest, because I was listening, your previous guests were talking about all that's happening within Grenada, assisting with the US and whatnot, and we need assistance and all these things. We have yet to receive one piece of confirmed evidence, either in Trinidad or any other country, that these people who were killed in these, I think it's 6 attacks now.
Yes.
Any form of drugs on their vessels. All we have been told is they are trafficking, now they're dead. And it's quite alarming because in the midst of all of that, you have the president of Venezuela, recognized by the majority of countries in the world, Nicolas Maduro, being labeled a drug trafficker. So if you're telling us and telling the world you are killing drug traffickers and you have identified one man who is, and one of your guests was making mention of it, supposedly standing in the way of getting Venezuela's oil, labeled as a drug trafficker, the only logical conclusion is that you're going to, treat with him as a combatant. I think that's the word that the US president used, as a combatant. And against that backdrop, we have what the US embassy was saying yesterday. We have them wanting to set up, I wouldn't say a base, but assistance in Grenada. We have a signed document between the past regime and the US, basically allowing for the US to have, if the need arise, have a base in Trinidad and Tobago. So it's all the words point, or everything seems to be pointing to, let's invade Venezuela and let's get rid of Nicolas Maduro. And that is troubling.
Yeah. And finally, Jensen, with respect to, of course, I believe it was the Minister of Homeland Security, because they changed the name, articulated that the family should file a missing persons report. They did not even offer to say to as you know, I suspect the embassy in Caracas is closed, or to say to the family, the reason why I'm bringing this up is, well, how can I assist you all in treating with this matter? Just to file a missing persons report? Is that all the government have said about this, or have they added more to the statement?
No, they haven't added anything more than that. And what was funny at the time, it's more sad than funny. There is no manifest, because the same Minister of Homeland Security, I was the person who interviewed him and did that. He is saying, how can you prove that these people were on the boat? There is no manifest, there is no log. Last I checked, you don't have a manifest for a fishing vessel. And I don't think anybody on a fishing vessel is going to have a piece of paper with the names of these 6 men. And even if that were the case and there was a manifest, can you find it now? Having been blown to smithereens, where are you going to find this manifest? Is it going to be in Caracas? Is it going to be in Venezuela? Where, as we already admitted, these men were there illegally, as in illegal entry. We are accepting that. That wasn't a legal port of entry. And that's why he had to return via an illegal means. So there's no legal record of him leaving Trinidad and entering Venezuela. Some say he went as far as Colombia. I have no evidence to support or deny that. So we can't check via the legal route. The only way we can know for certain is through the circumstantial evidence that I would have mentioned earlier. And for the Minister of Homeland Security to say that, it seems like a slap on the face to the relatives who are now grieving and who can't get a proper send-off, because there's nobody to send off. And they still don't have 100% confirmation. They have to rely on the good word of others.
Yeah, this is a very fascinating story that we will continue to follow. So thank you, Jensen, for appearing on the program on such short notice with our Grenadian audience. So thank you again.
No problem, man. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. Viewers and listeners, of course, that's journalist Jensen Levine, a media colleague over there in Trinidad and Tobago, who has been covering this story on the extrajudicial assassination of the Trinidadian fishermen without giving any rhyme or reason. Of course, the U.S. just expects us to believe their version of the story without providing any other pieces of evidence to suggest that, one, that these were, quote, narco-terrorists, quote unquote, or providing any evidence of what was found on these boats by just blowing them up. And the reality is, viewers and listeners, a lot of the narco trade that happens in the context of South America, and this is what U.S. reporting has said, this is what the ATF has said, and the DIA, the Drug Enforcement Agency, that a lot of that comes from the Pacific coast of Colombia. A lot of that goes up on the Pacific chain. In fact, they also reference fentanyl. There is no evidence as well in the reporting that Venezuela produces such. All of that happens on the Pacific flank of Central and South America, but we are not seeing any troops or any military buildup, for example, against Mexico, or any military buildup against Colombia, which interestingly is also part of NATO. So, folks, we'll be following this story. Of course, as we know, this buildup continues to happen in the region. We are still yet to hear from the government of Grenada, at least on following that press release that they issued. But we understand that the Prime Minister will be returning to Grenada this week, so perhaps there might be a press conference. We don't know. But what we do know is that there will be a protest march happening this coming week by the Coalition for the Zone of Peace, urging Grenada to say no to these two U.S. requests that have come in. And I use the word request here loosely. But I want to, of course, viewers and listeners, thank you for your participation on this week's edition of the Bub Report. We went longer than we normally do on the program. What's supposed to be a 2-hour program has turned into almost a 3-hour program. So I just want to thank you again, all viewers and listeners, for your participation in this week's program. And of course, on behalf of the producers, I'm your humble host, Dr. Kellen Bub. But I do want to leave you with this. I do want to leave you with a performance by the mighty Chalk Dust. So Chalk Dust wrote this song that says, all we have is sun, seawater, and sand. So the reason why I'm teeing this up is because in the context of negotiating with the United States, what bargaining chips would the Caribbean be bringing to the table? So let's hear what Chalk Dust has to say about this. And we want to credit Asir Moore for this footage. So, folks, again, I'm your humble host, Dr. Kellen Bub. We'll see you next week for another installment of the Bub Report. Take care. Bye-bye.
Everyone trying to protect their dollar, especially since Diana Grenada, instead of pulling together, the people who fight with Reagan and Thatcher. Dominicans suffering bad, they go down to Trinidad, cause Trini ain't living life, it is sad. Trini saying this big racket, they want to rock Trinidad's market with all the cheap and goods, and they won't accept it, but they want me to register as the national carrier. The way son, and she got turned on their own. It's not them Martinans understand. You need each other in the region. You can't trade with France, China, and Japan. And with your own people, you can't join hands. It's the burden tourists that come attention. They need me, we want their transportation. This time that you and Simmons walk hand in hand, was no, you're damn right. This one for the trains now. Hey, like, die. Caribbean leaders that they left, they mean that their country is best, cause they have more foreign exchange than the rest. Others walking high and mighty, claiming they have stability, cause they dollar in US is worth plenty. And they meeting regularly, join up all kinds of treaty, and after they drink the whiskey, the treaty, yeah, already. With their some talk and ignorance, lots of talk, but no action ever comments. It's time that peace in the day gets understand. We got to help the others in the region. We can't eat pitch and oil with rice and jam. No, we got to trade it for Grenadian yam. It's just a drop in the Arabian Ocean. And stop telling Guyanese they're from the mudland, cause all Trini have is just water and sand. Alive. Special verse. Special verse. Pulling together, they people to fight with Reagan and Thatcher. Eugenia Costin Diana, refusing to even go there, and naming Chambers for her behavior. Chambers used to block Grenadians' way, and as though they had to obey, cause to travel to Port of Spain, Grenadians we say, well, they see one Trini money to help build their economy, still you can't spend a $30 in their country. Anyway, it's time the whole Caribbean understand. We don't have gold uranium or diamond, so that means to get free gold on sand. More resources can change the global land. Now you have no opposition, Mr. Mitchell. How will you move Grenadians out of hell? Now you have no opposition. Talk to them Californians, but Grenada is always silent.
Hi everyone, thanks for checking out the Bub Report's social media pages. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch our weekly live show, follow our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can catch repeat episodes on Wednesdays at 4 and 5 p.m. respectively on CRFM Radio and GBN TV in Grenada. We are also viewed on Sundays at 8 p.m. on WPG 10 throughout the Caribbean. Thanks for watching.